to Deconstructing Christianity. I will be your host, your guide, as we will talk about today the benefits of atheism. This is going to be an interesting conversation, to say the least. But I look forward to this conversation. Hopefully, we can get some commenters on here. Hopefully, the StreamYard is acting right so that people can be able to have a little conversation. Uh, so, as a reminder, we have our gathering in San Antonio coming on October 31st through November 2nd. Go to the description of the video and you will see the link to the hotel to be able to sign up. Look forward to that tremendous opportunity to meet with you guys. So we just get about to the 5 minute mark. That's when we're going to get started. So right now I am also getting my the tickety talk set up. There's a different way, a better way. Just as you come on, let me know who you are, where you at, as we get ready for today's conversation. I'm sure it's going to be a grand one. Yeah, look at that. Just setting up the TikTok one since it acted right yesterday. We're going to see if we can continue utilizing it. So yesterday was a great conversation. I hope you guys were here for it. Uh, if you weren't, you can always go into the on Facebook and YouTube into the in the what you call it and be able to see it. Watch the videos. So hopefully you guys are able to do that. If you missed yesterday's conversation, but yesterday's conversation was pretty interesting. We had a couple people come on and talk on who were on TikTok and added to the commentary. We had different conversations on Facebook and YouTube. People got into their own conversations. For some reason, the link wouldn't work yesterday, but hopefully the link will work today for some people to be able to come on to the show and have a great conversation with us. I look forward to that, being able to have that type of conversation. Uh, this is why we do the show. The reason why we do this show is not to try to convince anybody that they need to leave their religion, but it is to help those of us and continue to help those of us who has already made that decision, and also for those of us who are looking to continue to grow in that decision, find our tribe, and that's what it's about. Uh, so today we're going to have this conversation. We're streaming on TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. So I will go back and forth with the comments, and that's why I will read the comments of anybody that I'm answering on the YouTube and Facebook, so that the TikTok people can hear that what their comments, or if I'm answering anybody's comments from anyone, any platform, I'll make sure that I read it off. We're usually going to go about 2 hours. We went 3 hours yesterday. Uh, they suckered me into it, but it's all right. We're gonna get started on the conversation in 1 minute, where we are talking about the benefits of atheism, because there's huge misnomers out there. There is a big misunderstanding. The propaganda is definitely going strong. That's why I chose the picture that you guys see, is because the propaganda is strong as far as what people think are the benefits, or think why people have become atheists or agnostic, and the data just doesn't support what they say. Unfortunately for the people on TikTok, you're not going to be able to see some of the graphs that I put up, but I'll explain them when I put those up on Facebook, YouTube, on the StreamYard platform. But I'll explain everything. I know people like the platforms that they're on. We're not going to have that. So we are about to get started here. If you're finding me for the first time, then thank you for being here. Appreciate it. The reason why TikTok, y'all can't see me is because TikTok cancels my lives every time they see me with my cigar. Which has just been lit. If you've been with me long enough, you know the show is going to last as long as my cigar lasts. So the more questions and the more statements people make, the longer the show lasts, because it takes me longer to smoke a cigar if people are asking me a whole bunch of questions and if I'm talking a lot. So if you find me for the first time, what we do is deconstruct. We are here, I help people deconstruct from Christianity. I help people rebuild their lives after they walk away from this religion. Because there is somewhat of a rebuilding that happens when you leave this religion. And the thing about it is, I don't just do it in a format of, patting you on the back or things like that, or it's through intelligence, but it's also through the actual building of your life. What do you want to see out of your life? How you want to grow out of your life? Because there's a lot of things. But before we get into the benefits of atheism, we got to look at the pathway of how people get there. How do people get to become atheists or agnostic? Many people will think, and many Christians think, that the reason why people become atheists or agnostic is because someone in the church hurt them. Some person hurt them in the church. Some pastor wasn't acting right. Some deacon, some deaconess, some choir director. That somebody did something to them and they have church hurt. And this is why people have this, the Christians walk around thinking that there are no real atheists. That you're just somebody that the church hurt, God didn't hurt you. That's one of the biggest things that we hear all the time. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. Some people do begin their journey because of what somebody did to them in the church. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them beginning that journey for that reason. Whatever reason a person begins their journey is just their reason. It doesn't have to be qualified by any person or any religion at all. And then the other one, which is why I put this particular picture up, is because people want to become atheists because they just want to sin. They just want to sin. You don't want to live a godly life. You just want to sin. So they think that the traits of an atheist is that they're addicted to porn, that they're a liar, have low self-esteem, ignorant about religion, has a superiority complex. And that the traits of a theist, a person who believes, is that they're confident, knowledgeable about his religion, is honest, isn't a porn addict, and is humble. Now I want you to really think about this for a second. Those traits can go on any person, regardless of if they're religious or if they're not. I used to know a pastor, well, I still know him, a pastor who's addicted to porn. I know someone who's Muslim, addicted to porn. I know someone who is Buddhist, they're addicted to porn. I know someone who is not any of those religions, they're addicted to porn. I know someone in every category that lies. I know plenty of people. Most Christians are ignorant about their religion. Most religious people in general are ignorant about their religion. And not stupid, ignorant. Just don't have the information. Just don't know the information. Has never spent the time to study the information. Has just went to church, mosque, synagogue, and just take whomever is leading the proceedings tell them. If they tell you that God is a good God, then you believe that God is a good God. Did you ever research to see if God was a good God? If they tell you that slavery is against God, then you believe that. Did you ever go read and study to find out? No. So most people in religion are ignorant about their own religion because they never take the time to actually study their own religion. And when it comes to, as Oliver's law is saying, sexual repression breeds sexual perversion. And this is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I know this is going to sound horrible, but I know of people when I was growing up and I was in high school. There were certain guys who would purposely chase the daughters of pastors. And the reason why they chased the daughters of pastors is because they told me that the daughters of pastors are the freakiest girls. And it was quite often that the daughters of pastors wind up getting pregnant in the years of high school. PK kids are a demonstration of that sexual repression. And then their own parents are also a demonstration of that. There are two of the most common things that destroys most pastors is inappropriate sexual behavior and money laundering. Those are the two. Inappropriate sexual behavior, money laundering are the two main reasons most pastors fail. So to suggest that liars are people who are atheists, porn addiction, that is merely propaganda. When we know the truth is, a person who is a theist is not honest and humble, and they may strive to be. But when we get into the benefits of atheism, I'm going to tell you why atheists actually strive and come out better in their humility and their honesty and in their confidence. It's very easy to understand that. Now, so when we think about, and this may sound crazy to some people, what is the benefits of atheism? Well, some of the benefits of atheism is the fact that when you look at it from a national sense and realize that atheism has grown tremendously over the past 5 years. 5 years, it's experienced a boost. The reason why it's experienced a boost over the last 5 years is because the pandemic, with people being at home and people engaging on the internet more so than they did prior to the pandemic, people began to research and study more information. People began to see videos like mine and like other people who create this type of information. They began to see and study what certain professors who are on YouTube come out and talk about. And during the pandemic, there were plenty of people who became major influencers in every different sphere. But in the religious sphere, they grew tremendously. And there are different time frames in our history that we see growth in atheism. And your definition of, so Rupert Tanji, Rupert, I'm just saying Rupert. I'm messing up that man's last name. Sorry about that. He says that atheist is a person that sees themselves as their own God. And atheist is a person who believes in an atheist is a person who believes in a spiritual God. Now, I don't know if you're asking a question or you're making a statement, but the answer to that is no and no. An atheist is a person who does not believe in a God, that a God exists, based on the fact that not enough information has been provided for them to believe and accept a God. It has nothing to do with personal belief in personal self as being a God. So when we've seen this growth, every time people have the opportunity to take the time to actually study, people have grown away from these religions. And you have to ask the question, what happened about 30, what year is this? About 40 years ago, that truly allowed for people to begin to walk away from this religion? We have went from the 1980s in America at 80.5% of the population being atheist to now, even though the scale I got up there says 37%, around 40% of Americans are now atheists. Around 40% growth. Well, not 40% of Americans, but a 40% growth in atheism. And it's the internet. If Christianity ever wanted to stop something to be able to hold on to its power, it should have stopped the internet. If Islam ever wanted to hold on to its power, it needs to stop the internet, because the internet allowed for us to be able to communicate with each other on a worldwide scope. It allowed for us to be able to learn from one another on a worldwide scope. No longer did you have to go to the classroom. No longer did you have to only rely on your immediate community. Now you have the world to be able to learn from, get information from, grow from. So once the internet hit around 93, 94, well, 94, 95, when the internet really was available on a large scale to most people, that's why there was a big jump between 90 and 95 in the percentage of growth of atheism. And that's simply because we began to have access to information that we did not have before. And as that information grew, people started connecting and finding communities and growing and becoming atheists, walking away from this religion. And this is why I predict, I am not a prophet, but I predict that the generation of children born now, that half of those children in free countries, because some countries are still, you don't have the freedom to be able to publicly be a atheist. But the generation that is born now, the little babies right now, just born right now, they will be, half of them will be atheists. Half of them will be, so we're talking roughly about 20 years from now. I'll be the ripe old age of 73. So by the time I'm 73, the generation of 20-year-olds, and in that range, I'm predicting that in most countries where you have free access to learn, will be atheists. And one of the reasons why I will make that prediction, because it is not a prophecy, it is a prediction based on information that we already know, we already have access to. But based on the information we already know, that the religiosity for 15 to 34-year-olds in 2017 to 2020, that the majority of countries where people have free access to information, where people have countries that have higher levels of education, countries that are not dogmatic in their religiosity towards their governments, that the overwhelming majority of those 15 to 34-year-olds are atheists or non-religious. That the ones who practice religion are fewer, much fewer. So just to give you a quick rundown of some of those countries, and I want you, and the reason why I said that they have more access, they're more educated. They have better governmental system. Their government system is not pressed. I ain't gonna say they got better government system, but their government system is not pressed by religious organizations. These countries include, in order, and this is in the order of who has the most atheist, non-religious people between the ages of 15 and 34 between 2017 and 2020. This is in the order of who has the most. And I want you to think about the commonalities between these countries. You got number one, China. Number two, South Korea. Number three, Sweden. Then Chechnya. Then New Zealand, Japan, Norway, Iceland, Finland, Estonia, Netherlands, United Kingdom, Denmark, Australia, France, Vietnam, Canada, Germany, Thailand, Switzerland. Uh, they got Germany on there a second time. Spain, Austria, Slovenia, Hungary, Taiwan, Lithuania, Belarus, Belarus, Slovakia, Portugal, and then the United States. Now this graph is going to be important again later. That list, hell, I ain't gonna make it important again later. Don't make it important right now. What are the commonalities between the countries from China down to the United States, and the fact that the 15 to 34-year-old population is mostly, now when you get to America, but for the most part, they're mostly atheists. Now, by the time you get to Spain, Austria, Germany, they start to be less than 50%. They start to get less than 50%. But China, South Korea, Sweden, Czechia, New Zealand, Japan, Norway, Iceland, Finland, Estonia, Netherlands, all these countries have higher educational levels than the countries below them, than the United States. All those countries have less crime than the United States. All those countries have less drug addictions than the United States. They have less people. They have less people in prison than the United States. The quality of life is higher in all those countries than the United States. So all these countries with less crime, higher education, better health care, less people in prison, higher quality of life, living longer, less jacked up stuff in their food than the United States, they have more atheists. They have more atheists, especially in this graphic between 15 and 34. If that's the trend right now in 2017 to 2020, between 15 and 34-year-olds, you got to realize that a lot of these people are going to be the parents or parents of the kids that's being born today. They will be the parents of the kids that's going to be born over the next 10 years. What do you think those kids are going to be? Do you think those kids are going to be atheists, or do you think they're going to be theists? So that's not a prophecy. That's a prediction based on the information that we have. Marion Miller, I'll go ahead and answer this question. It's not part of our conversation. Okay, you don't believe in God. Do you believe in the devil? I would like to know because I have left the church and the religion. Absolutely not. I do not believe in the devil. The devil does not exist. The devil is only the negative part of you. The devil is the negative part of another person and the devious thoughts that they may have. Just like I just mentioned how in this graph, the United States incarcerates more people than anybody else. The United States has higher juvenile incarceration than anybody else. Yet the United States has more people between the age of 15 and 34 who are religious. Whether they are non-practicing religious or they're practicing religious, they have a higher religiosity. Yet we commit more crimes. The devil is the person committing the crime, and whatever attitude they had that justified them committing that crime. We incarcerate more people than anybody else. Yet we're more religious than other countries. So there is no devil. The devil was just a creation by man in the same way that that God was created by man. So no. So this is why there's nothing to fear. This is why when we get into some of the benefits, one of the benefits of being an atheist is that there is no devil, there is no lake of fire, so that there is no hell. So there's absolutely no reason to be fearful of a devil or hell, which is the final thing, the most difficult thing for people to get past once they deconstruct from religion. And that's getting past that whole hell and the devil thing. Now, I did find this graph this interesting. This is why I'm bringing this up. This is somebody else's rendition of perps. The last one I don't really care for because I care less about top influencers who are atheists. And I'm not sure Bruce Lee actually falls in that category, but he may. I have no idea. But it is true that more atheists are generally more educated than theists. And of course, there are theists who are scientists. There are theists who are, teachers and mathematicians and all these sorts of things. But the overwhelming majority of people with higher degrees of education, especially those in the STEMs, are atheists. And in general, because atheism usually comes about through education, the education of you studying the Bible, reading it, understanding it, diving deep into the history of it, atheists, even those without degrees or certifications, are still generally more intelligent and more educated than the theists. But because they are more educated in the ways that our system desires for, grades education, I should say, there is also the situation that atheists commit less crime. I'm not saying that crime is centered around religion. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that crime is centered around poverty and oppression. Oftentimes, the people who are impoverished and oppressed are more religious than the ones who are doing the oppressing or the ones who are just turning a blind eye to it. But atheists, generally because of the higher levels of education, are generally in a better financial situation. So generally they do not commit as many crimes. Oppressed people being marginalized, are generally more religious, but we know they are oftentimes in lower income areas, and therefore more crime happens. It sounds odd to think about that. You would think that a group of people who are more religious would commit less crimes, but finances topples God. Think about that. The way that they say if you're a Christian, if you believe in God, then it will be demonstrated by how you live your life. Even though that is works, it'll be demonstrated how you live your life. Marginalized people generally believe in God more so than people who are not, and yet there's more crime in their neighborhoods because of poverty. Said I've left religion and Christianity, but I'm still holding on that there is a higher power. I know that God is in me. That is okay. Help you how? In the sense that how to reveal the God inside you, or how to let go of the idea that there has to be a higher power. Because why does there have to be a higher power? But so where was I? Oh yeah, finances is more powerful than God. I mean, it doesn't take much to realize that finances, that money is more powerful than God. That's probably why your Jesus in the book say you can't serve both God and mammon. Because obviously those who are committing the crimes, who claim to be Christians, are committing, the money is more impactful. Those people who go to church on Sundays, but yet when they go to a restaurant, uh, or they go buy something, or they go somewhere and somebody don't charge them correctly, and they just skip out and they think that's a blessing. Obviously, the money is more powerful. How many of you guys have ever heard of that or seen that? I've witnessed it on so many occasions where a person doesn't get charged full freight on something, and they think that that is a blessing from their God. They have literally stolen, but they think that their God blessed them. I know I've seen it. I know I've seen it plenty of times where people think that. Somebody made a mistake, wasn't trying to bless them by paying for their meal or paying for anything. Somebody made a mistake and they said, oh, that God is blessing them. Now, if you're a true Christian, if you're a true believer in this book, you're supposed to be like, oh no, it's great, it's great. You know that, oh no, I gotta pay for that. That's, I need to take care of that bill. I can't let that slide. But let's finish going through this slide while y'all think about that. Scientists, atheists are more scientific. They follow facts more so than they will follow a belief. We will look at what information that we have, and when we don't have information, we just tend to say, I don't know, or I don't know yet, or it's a theory or a hypothesis, because we're still trying to, you know, prove it or see and to see which way it goes. And you don't have a predetermined, you may want something to go somewhere else, but you're accepting of wherever it goes. So it doesn't have to be one way, and that's the only way it can be until it is a proven fact. And I have found that atheists are more tolerant. This is a benefit, it's a perk, is to be more tolerant of other people. I know that on here I get so many hate comments on videos. It's like Christians are seeking out a place for them to launch their attacks. We've developed a saying, there's no hate like Christian love, because the level of tolerance is just not there. Y'all know that I really got started during this. If you've been with me for these years, you know that I really got started because I was defending a guy who had walked away from being an associate pastor, walked away from Christianity in a small town. He was getting hate mail, death threats, that got fired from his job, not the church part. It's understandable for the church to let him go, but he got fired from his regular job because he didn't believe in this God anymore. The level of intolerance, you got people who family members have disowned them because they stopped believing in this religion. Tell me who's tolerant and who's not. You got a whole religion, you got versions of the Christianity that tells you to disengage. Jehovah's Witness, disengage from them. They apostate. Seven-day Adventists, disengage. They're apostate. Mormons, disengage. The all these different versions. If the Amish kid goes out and want to stay out there, he has to disengage from his family. And if the Catholic Church get too pissed off at you, they'll excommunicate you. No tolerance. Less tolerant people. Very much less tolerant people. And they teach that and they push that in government reforms and not want to tolerate other people. Hey, we're going to put the 10 Commandments up. Okay, put up the Code of Hammurabi. Let's put up the Confessions of Mayat. Let's put everybody's stuff up. No, just the Christian. Because even though we know it's a lie that this is a Christian nation, we just want to put the Christian. That's how they do it. Now, I did find this one interesting, that atheists are married longer. I found that one very interesting, and so I had to go and do some research on it, and it turns out to be an actual true thing. Atheists have longer marriages, and it probably goes in line with what's the secondary, the perk right behind that one, which is that atheists are generally happier, which is the one I want to talk about the most. But marriage, atheists are married longer because they're generally happier, because generally they're in better financial positions, but also you don't have all the guilt that comes along with being in a religion. This is the main thing. This is why atheists are happier. Christian cultism is all about you being worthless, you being a filthy rag. It's all about you not being worthy and not being good enough, and then on top of all that unworthiness, you got to make sure that you're going to this church, make sure that you're wearing these clothes, make sure you talk like this, make sure you only do these types of activities, make sure you do this. It's just so much bullshit. It's so much ritualistic things that you got to uphold, and it's all of it is guilt ridden. They may say people they have learned to love or tolerate going to church, but let's be real. Most people don't want to go to church. When you was a kid, I don't know many kids who wanted to go to church. Who just like, I want to go to church and I want to praise the Lord. You might want to go to church because that's where you saw some of your friends and you got to hang out, you got to play, you got to talk to some of your friends. I know a bunch of guys who, I can say it for myself. I started going, I was in church at 15 because that was an opportunity for me to sit with my girlfriend. So I was going to church, not because I was so committed. My girlfriend was there. Now, I was trying to understand the Bible at that time, and I was asking questions, but my friends were there, my girlfriend was there. That's why I was in the church. The full reason, the main reason, the primary reason. But most kids don't want to go there. And most adults, it becomes habit, it becomes ritual. And you go there, and most of them are bored and they're falling asleep. That's why they can't wait for the choir to sing. They can't wait to get up there and dance. They can't wait to do something. That's why the one church in Orlando, they got roller coasters and shit coming out on the stage and got high wire acts and everything because they're trying to entertain the people to keep them awake. Most people don't want to go to church. Yes, Tim, going to church to get the pum pum. Most men who, it's true. Most men are in that church looking for Delilah because Delilah got that good pum pum. As long as some good Delilah pum pum can make you tell somebody your superpowers. But most dudes are not in church for that reason. Most people are not in church because they want to praise this God, because they just feel so caught up with this God. The ritual of going to church. If they actually studied their book, they would realize that they don't have to go to church in order to have this God in their life. That they never had to go to church if they actually studied their book. But they don't, because the pastor got to get paid too. They got to get their money. But this sense of dread, though, being told that you are not worthy enough, that no matter how much good you do in your life, we had someone yesterday on the show talking about no matter how much good you do in your life, you will never be good enough. Your good can never outweigh your evil. And I'm going to say that is bullshit. But that is the main mentality that they plug into the people who belong to these organizations, and because of that, they get stuck. Because of that, they feel guilty. They feel like they have to be there. They can never relieve themselves, and then because of that guilt, they're never happy. Yes, Sean, I've said that last one about top influencers. I could care less about that. Those people flip flop all the time. Uh, somebody else created this. I didn't create it, but they you're just not happy. The greatest benefit to becoming atheist or agnostic, because I put agnostics in the same category. The greatest benefit to becoming atheist or an agnostic is the freedom from the guilt and the low self-esteem. The freedom from the guilt and the low self-esteem is tremendous. Tremendous. Because that low self-esteem that you have to deal with is crazy. To always think that you are lacking. If you knew a father who always berated their children and told them that they were never good enough, would you say that that was a good father? Legitimate question. Is that a good father? I'm waiting on some answers because it's hard for me to wait for answers. Like this short period of time I did this radio show, and dead air is severely frowned upon. I had dead air for like 3-4 seconds and I got a phone call. Religion is made up and you are a racist, says say Palestinian. Jesus was a Palestinian. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know if you're calling me a racist. I don't know what you're saying. The Palestinians say that. I don't know what you're talking about. What was the question? If a father was, because I momentarily forgot the question. I momentarily forgot the question, Kate. If a if a father constantly berated his children and told them that they weren't good enough, that they were filthy rags, would you consider him a good father? Sean, I like Sean's comment. As a father, anything my son does is more than enough. Proud of him, even if all he does is smash cars together. Exactly. Please don't write in all caps. But yeah, the fact of telling people you're born a sinner. Think about it. This God says that every thought from man from his youth is evil. So why else? You know what? That's the reason why. That's another reason why the crime rate is so high with Christians, with believers. You're told that every thought that you have from birth is evil, and then you're told on the flip side of that that all you got to do is believe in Jesus and you will be forgiven and get into heaven. So I have evil thoughts. I can go act on my evil thoughts, and then all I got to do is ask Jesus for some forgiveness, and then I still get to go to heaven, even though I've committed all these heinous acts. Although there is the contradiction, but it does say that I will live, I'll be a new creature, you know. But then I'm gonna have a thorn in my side, so I'm always gonna struggle with something. So maybe this robbing people is my thorn, you know. But I am a believer in this Jesus. But I'm a filthy rag. But then there's gonna be some that he ain't gonna know me. He says some he ain't gonna know who I am, though. But he does say that his desire is for all of his children to come and be with him. So I look, you know, they out here just doing everything. Yeah, and whoever the Satanist person that came on here, the belief in Satan is just as problematic as the belief in Jehovah. It's like, ooh, I'm stronger, I'm better because I believe in Satan. Whoa. Oh, Rupert, God didn't say that. Religion did. Rupert, just answer this one question. Is the ancient writings, are they inspired by your God? Are they the words of your God? That's all I want to know from you. I mean, you don't want to answer questions because you wouldn't answer the questions yesterday, so I doubt if you'll answer this question. But you know, like when it says, "And the Lord commanded," or "the Lord spoke to this person," is that not the word of your God? Or you know, when they is these words were inspired by God, is it not the word of your God? I know you're not going to answer because that's the other part of being part of these religions, being a theist. You can't answer questions that you know would put your religion in doubt because you can't be honest. See, that's one of the other beauties of being atheist is that you have the ability to be honest at a more authentic level. You have the ability to care at a more authentic level. You see, when you are being told to love based on the Bible, you're being told to give to the poor, you're being told to take care of the widows. When your morality is based on you being told, and your morality is based on you trying to avoid hell and get to a heaven, how authentic is your morality? Because when you become atheist or agnostic, your morality is more authentic because it's just who you are. As Ashkra, I'm saying the name wrong, said yesterday, doing good things makes you a good person. Doing evil things makes you an evil person. So if I'm doing good things authentically, then I am authentically a good person. If I'm doing good things because a book told me so and there's a reward that I'm going to achieve and I'm trying to avoid this damnation, I'm not being authentic, so I'm not an authentic good person. I am a condition-based good person, right? Coach, I know you say you don't debate, but I love to see you take your knives on other myths that the Torah plagiarized. I don't know who Andrew Wilson is. Right. I see. But see, this is why I don't like talking to people like this person because I ask the question they can't answer. They refuse to answer because they know it that they're caught. But it does say that all scripture are inspiration of God, and a lot of the Lord said, the Lord said. So you know, it's like, come on now. Oh, not you, coach. I was talking about about the example. What are you talking about? Answer the question. Do you believe the Bible is the word of God? If you can't answer the question, stop talking. Stop talking. I always wonder, it amazes me, like the best people at running away from a question is religious people. See, this is the thing about like that propagandist picture that I got up that talks about that how theists are more honest and confident. But ask them one question. Do do you believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God or is the word of God? It's a yes or no question. It's a yes or no answer, right? It doesn't take a whole lot. It's yes or no. It's not, oh, you got to listen to the word that you hear. You hear your head, your voice talking to you in your head when you're speaking. And nobody asked you about that. Nobody asked about all that. So anyway, that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of not believing in this God. You don't have to run from questions. You don't have to uh, try to deviate and do workarounds. You know, you just answer stuff, yes or no. You know, you get to be actually honest and say, hey, you know what? You know, this is irritating me. I don't have to. I can. I don't have to believe in this. This thing is getting on my nerves. I can believe in this if I want to. I don't have to follow some program. It is what it is. Okay, finally, Rupert answers. Oh my God. The word is the word of God. In the beginning was the word, and the word was God. So, yes. So, you believe the Bible is the word of God. So, what aspect of what I said is not from God? Since everything that I had said way back 5 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago. So, if somebody's watching this and you're confused as to what the hell he's talking about, it was 5 minutes ago. It took him like 7 minutes to answer this question. When have I ever ran from? You just ran 7 minutes from this question, and yesterday you didn't answer none of the questions. But you just ran from this question for like 7 minutes. When I was quoting how your Bible talks about the fact that your every thought from man from his youth is evil, and that all you got to forgive, that all you got to do is ask for forgiveness, but yet you're supposed to be a new creature once you believe in this Jesus and live a certain way, but yet there's a thorn that's in your side, and Jesus' grace is supposed to be sufficient. So you still committing crime. If your evil thought was robbery, Jesus is supposed to make you a new creature. Belief in this is supposed to make you a new creature, so you shouldn't be robbing no more. But you'll have a thorn in your side, which might be the robbery. So you're still robbing. But Jesus' grace is sufficient. So all you got to do is ask for forgiveness for all your robbing that you're doing. So you still get to go to heaven. That's the Bible. A whole bunch of flippity floppy. The beauty of being atheist or agnostic is that you don't have to worry about that. Your morality is authentic. If you rob, you rob. But if you don't rob because you authentically don't want to be a robber. Not because there's a good luck charm at the end. Oh, if you don't rob and everything, you get to go to heaven. But if you do rob, you go to hell. That's not authentic. That's forced. That's pushed. That's pushed. That's not free will. That's somebody forcing you to do it. TikTok, I move out the way because the algorithm will kick me off if I with my cigar. and that picture was getting on my nerves. But that's what I'm talking about. That's the beauty of it. You have to run around in circles as a religious person for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, avoiding the question. And then to come running back and finally answer the question. But to answer, all it does is demonstrate exactly what I was saying. Not believing in this religion gives you so many mental and emotional freedoms that you wouldn't know that you had. People get so caught up into having to follow these rituals and follow this book that it creates stress in their life. It creates frustration in their life. You can't be your authentic self. You remember what is about 20 years ago? Well, for some of y'all kind of young, but about 20 years ago, it was about 20, 30 years ago. Everything was about, oh, you got to be your authentic self. That was like the big craze as far as self-help was going, is finding and being your true authentic self. And I thought it was odd. How can you be your true authentic self when you have a whole bunch of cultural and religious requirements that you have to uphold? And the cultural things you can let go of. You can stop dressing a certain way. You can live your life a certain way. But the religious part, and a lot of that religious stuff comes from uneducated people. Comes from uneducated people. So how can you be your authentic self when you're trying to live up to a make-believe God that the culture that wrote it is 2,000 years old, and they're writing at a time frame where their morality is not higher than your morality today? I want you to think about that. Their morality is lower than the morality that you have today, but yet you are trying to live by a standard of their morality, trying to twist the information to fit into your morality today. But it doesn't fit into your morality of today. TikTok caught me smoking. They're trying to restrict me. But it doesn't fit. But the freedom that you get when you walk away from this religion, knowing that you are truly yourself, you can actually find out who you really are, and you can actually be yourself. And here's the thing about it. It's also the finality of life. Many people think that the greatest joy or purpose that you would have in life is knowing and believing in this God. And your purpose is to worship this God and make it into heaven, right? Being able to make it in heaven. That's your joy. That's the purpose. But once you walk away from this religion and you recognize that your purpose is of your own creation, because life now becomes finite. Life now is not this everlasting, eternal life of being on bended knee, praising and worshiping this God forever. All you're doing is just worshiping this God forever. That doesn't sound like heaven. That sounds like slavery. But now that you know the finite of this life, oh, let me stop worrying about what other people think about me. Oh, let me stop worrying about this minor thing here or this minor thing there. Now that I know that life is finite and this is the only one I got, let me enjoy the hell out of it. Let me make the best out of it. Let me grow. Let me become the best person I can possibly become, or let me go and travel the world. Why am I putting so much energy into work? I'm gonna go travel the world and go see stuff and do stuff and fulfill things, desires that I want to fulfill. I want to climb this mountain, jump off this bridge, you know, hang glide, scuba dive. Just want to go sit inside of a place in the middle of the woods and be perfectly quiet and silence. You'll realize the true value of life and actually start enjoying it. Those are the benefits that's one of the major benefits of not believing in this God. When you want to come on the show, let me know what you want to talk about. Because if you're trying to do one of them, oh wait a minute. Oh, that was Bubby. Hold on. So I know who that is. All right, y'all. We're gonna have a conversation with Bubby. He got some answers from yesterday. So we're gonna take a slight detour in our conversation. Let me bring Bubby on. How you doing, sir? Oh, wait a minute.
Hey, how's it going, man?
There you go. I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Good. So we talked yesterday about the Canaanite woman and about the Roman centurion that Jesus helped.
Yes.
And then I went and talked to my family about all that stuff because I thought it was interesting questions that you had. And when I was talking to them, a couple thoughts occurred to me. One of them, like why would Jesus talk to the Canaanite woman in the way that he did, like calling her a dog and all that stuff? And we both came to the conclusion that that there's a lot of history, negative history between the Canaanites and the Israelites. So that's why there would be tension there. But also a thought occurred to me that, like keeping that context in mind, a thought occurred to me that God tests all of us frequently, and He doesn't give us tests that are like out of our reach. It's stuff that we can handle. Actually, I don't know about the last part, but anyway, God does test us, and so like a lot of the things that we're hearing from the Bible, these are tests for the people that like they just watch the test happen. So the thought that occurred to me was that there's this Canaanite woman that wants Jesus to perform a miracle on her child. Mm-hmm. And we don't know anything about this Canaanite woman except for the interaction that happened. And maybe the test that God gave that woman before he decided to perform this miracle was for her to humble herself and her to be like, yeah, maybe I am a dog, but I still view you as Christ the Lord, and I want you to please save my child, because that is a big part of Christianity is to be humble and put God above yourself. So that was a thought that popped in my head. And then the last part is that I was talking to my family, and my source is my family for this, so maybe we'll look it up later. But they brought up the fact that so the Roman centurion comes up to Jesus and says, I would like you to cure my slave of his illness. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the things that you said was, God just granted the centurion he just granted him the miracle, and he didn't seem to be nearly as mean to him or to test him in any way. Why is that? And then you brought up the point, well, the centurion has power and the Canaanite woman doesn't. And so I brought that up to my family, and then they brought up that back in those days, Jews were not allowed in Roman households. And the first thing that Jesus said to them was, okay, bring me back to your home, and I'll cure your slave for you. So that is him putting the Roman to the test, telling him, okay, bring me into your house, which he knows is illegal, which he knows that the Roman can't do. And then I will sit, and then I will cure your child. Then I will cure your slave. And then the Roman, even though the Roman doesn't bring him back to his house, the Roman says, "Listen, my house isn't worthy for you. You are above my house. You are above me. And I know if you just say the words, my servant shall be healed. So in both of those cases, there were people that, were enemies of the Israelites. And in both of those cases, Jesus put them to the test where it comes to, if you humble yourself, I'll grant you this miracle.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying, and I can see how you and your family drew some of those conclusions. The flaw that I see within drawing those conclusions is this. When you talk about the Roman centurion and how it was illegal for them to come into his house, the test of Jesus saying that, hey, bring me to your house, and the Roman centurion saying, nah, you're too great of a guy to come to my house, and him humbling himself. I don't see that as him humbling himself. I see that as the centurion playing politics. I need something from you. I know that I can't get it directly from you in my house because that would be illegal and would put my house in danger. So I'm gonna placate you and politic you to be able to still get the miracle out of you. Now, I could be off base with that one, but here's the bigger thing that I wanted to lead into with that idea. You're saying that Jesus was testing them, but he didn't test the Roman centurion by degrading him. The Jesus character actually challenges the Roman law, right? Can we agree on that he's challenging the Roman law?
Yeah, he's definitely challenging the Roman law. He's saying, you have to let me in your bring me to your house, and then I'll cure your slave.
Okay,
that's illegal. That's against Roman decree. Yeah.
So when he's talking to the Canaanite woman, the Jewish culture at that time frame hated the Canaanites. Well, they always hated the Canaanites. Even though they were originally Canaanites themselves, they hated the Canaanites. To such a degree that they got stories about how they genocide the Canaanites. And when the tribe of Dan couldn't completely genocide the Canaanites, they were instructed by this God to make them into slaves. So they've always had, so you mentioned the contention they've had with the Canaanites. So in the book of Joshua, it really goes deeper into that whole contention with the Canaanites and how they were to treat the Canaanites. Even though Leviticus says treat your neighbors as yourself, they don't. But this Jesus character now has an opportunity when dealing with the Canaanite woman to challenge the cultural bias of the Israelite people, has the opportunity to adhere to what Leviticus said about treating your neighbors as you would treat yourself. But instead, he degrades the woman. See, I don't see that as a test because there is no good test in degrading someone. Let me. I didn't want to put it in this.
Let me respond to what you just said.
Okay.
There's no big test in degrading someone. Like, we completely agree. He is being, lack of a better term or whatever, he's being very mean to her. He's being very rude to her, degrading her. Absolutely. And like, we disagree because I think it definitely is a test. I think if you put yourself in the Canaanite woman's shoes and you imagine yourself being the opposition to this other person, like these guys have like deep history of hating each other. Both groups hate each other. You just went over the atrocities that happened on her people from them, vice versa. Both of them have had war crimes committed against each other's people. They're enemies, right? So she's coming up and asking for a miracle for her kid, and then he calls her a dog. He's like, I'm not going to help you. You're a dog. Like, that is a test, because try to imagine, like, you come up to this person asking for help, and they're your enemy, right? And then they call you a dog. You're like, yeah, fine. Maybe I am a dog, but even dogs deserve scraps, and you are God. You are the Son of God, and you can perform these miracles. And he says, your faith has saved you. And that's not like hypothesizing. I think this might be her test to give up her hatred for an Israelite man and to humble herself in front of God and be like, you know, I would love your miracle.
And so yesterday the conversation was about the morality, right? But how moral Jesus is supposed to be representative of a higher moral standard if he is God. And if Jesus is a representative of God, if he is God and he's supposed to be of this higher moral standard, why would he have to, should he not have exhibited the traits of someone who is ethnocentric? I didn't want to use this example yesterday, but I'm gonna use it today. And I didn't come up with it. I heard somebody else come up with it. I heard this young lady called The Thinker utilize this example. And I can't remember exactly how she said it, so I'm gonna say it in my way. All right. So let's say Jesus, instead of appearing when he did, Jesus appeared in the 1920s, and he's a white man. And he's known to perform miracles. He's walking through the streets of New York, and here comes a black woman and says, Jesus, would you please heal my daughter? And Jesus says, I only came for the white Americans. I didn't come for you N-words. So the woman says, yes, but even the N-words gets the benefits of being in America. So please help my daughter. And he says, you know what? Because you recognize that you're an N-word, I'm going to go ahead and help you.
I don't think he says because you recognize you're an N-word though. Like,
yeah, he does.
Wait, let's go to the passage. Let's see if he says because you recognize you're. I don't think he says because you recognize you're a dog. I think what he's saying because of your faith has saved you. Like I remember the big.
Yeah, he does say. Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish."
Yeah, see, I don't think it's not about her admitting that she's a dog. It's about her faith that Jesus is God, you know?
But he still referred to her as a dog.
Absolutely.
If Jesus was walking around today and referred to me as an N-word, it doesn't matter what else he says or does. Matter of fact, I'm 53. I played sports in this is actually a perfect example. I played sports growing up, right? Playing baseball at this one park, Perry Palm Park in Marietta, Georgia. The owners of the park loved me, right? I was hitting home runs. I was great at playing baseball. I could go into the concession stands and they would let me come in the back and they give me all kind of food and everything for free, the whole deal. I was the only person in my family, like the only player on that park that I knew had that type of access. Perry Palm, his family loved me, or so I thought. Every trophy that I have from when I played baseball, they all read Lorenzo Sambo Reed. They would announce over the thing, home run by Lorenzo Sambo Reed. I was a child. I didn't know what the hell a Sambo was at that time frame. But this is what this family who loved me, this family who was feeding me, and this family who was utilizing me to get recognition for the state teams and all that kind of stuff. But what they really thought of me was Sambo. So it doesn't matter how much they bless me when they called me that.
So I'm assuming Sambo is a derogatory word.
Have you ever read Uncle Tom's Cabin?
No.
Oh. So in Uncle Tom's Cabin, it is not Uncle Tom who is the one that, and it's not Uncle Tom who is the one that is against the black people, of his own black people. It is the character Sambo. Sambo is the house slave who tells on the other slaves when they're trying to escape, who is always reporting back to master. You seen Django?
Right, yeah. So they were calling you that guy.
Yeah, so in Django, the one that Samuel Jackson plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a Sambo.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry that happened to you. I know you're not bringing it up for an apology or anything like that. And I know I'm not. I'm just saying I'm very sorry that you went through that. That's terrible. Now, I think there's a bit of I think there's a difference, because with those people, they're getting something from you. You're the guy hitting home runs. They're getting like there is a give and take. Like they get to be around the guy hitting the home runs. They get to be around you. There's a social benefit to that. Now with Jesus, he gets nothing from helping this woman. This woman is just asking for something. She's nobody. With you, you're somebody. You're the guy hitting the big home runs. You're the big star athlete of today. So you coming back, you hanging out with them, you seeing their family. That is something. They are getting something out of that. Jesus doesn't get anything out of it.
But he's supposed to be the higher moral God. He should not be calling her a dog. If Jesus came for everybody, why the separation? Why calling her a dog?
So that's what I'm saying is that I think it's the test. This is just me saying this is what I think. God tests us all the time. And a big part of God testing us is to humble us.
But the woman is already humbled. She doesn't require, she already came with faith. You see, that's the other part.
This is what I'm saying. So just like in your example with the family, right? Like that family coming up to you and like bringing you back and all that stuff. They still clearly had racism and hatred towards you, right?
Right.
Right. So this, like, even though they're doing a nice thing, they still had that racism and hatred towards you. Even though they're saying that. So maybe this, of course, we just guessing, right? I wasn't there. I have no idea. But maybe with her, she swallowed enough of her pride for this person that she hates, this group of people that she's racist towards, and then he made her go a step further. And then she humbled herself even more. Like the thing that I'm trying to get at is that we really don't know, like with me saying that this is a test for her, we really don't know what's going through her head. And we really don't know what her relationship with God is.
But this is not a test for her. That's my point. So your analogy, you switched the character traits. In the story, Jesus is the racist white family that was calling me Sambo, not the woman. Jesus is the racist white Sambo. Jesus is the one who is calling someone the derogatory name as they called me the derogatory name.
Right, but like I said before, I don't think that your story is really applicable because now with all due respect, I don't think it's really applicable because that white family is getting something from you. You are the guy, like I said before, you're the guy getting the big home runs, you're the guy doing all this. They're seeking you out to come and hang out with them, and you're the big star athlete. They want to be around you.
I think that's an escape so that you don't have to put. Okay, so here's a hard thing for people to do who believe in a God. It's hard to think of that God doing something wrong. When at the end of the day, if you look at just the nuts and the bolts of the story, the woman had faith. Jesus called her a dog. The woman still had faith. And he realized, damn, she right. And then he went ahead and blessed her. Her faith was never in question in the whole story. At no time. I see other people saying on TikTok saying that he was testing her faith. Her faith was never in a question. There's nothing in the story unless you make it up, unless you add to it, which is what you're doing when you're saying that maybe she had racism, maybe, but it is the Jewish people of that day who had Canaanites on a lower tier. And it's not the first time. Remember when he met the Sumerian woman and he told that woman to go get him some water? Because they treated Sumerians like lower cousins. They were higher than the Canaanites, but like lower cousins. So it's an attribute of the people of that day that the Canaanites were viewed this way, and they were written this way into the book. But like I said, just the nuts and bolts, without trying to add anything to it, the woman had faith from day one. She had faith.
I know that's what I'm saying. Like this is what I brought up at the beginning. This is how I'm viewing it. Like you were asking, well, why would he treat her that way? And this is why I'm saying, well, God is known to test us. God tests all of us. And a big part of God testing us is to humble us. And I mean, now I'm repeating myself, right? You already know what I'm going to say, right? Exactly. Yeah. So, like, I don't even need to say it. You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and you know what I'm going to say, that the lady was already humble. The fact that she came, the fact that she came to him, she was already humble. So there was nothing to test.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So we see it differently now. The only thing I want to say about your analogy, the only thing I think that's wrong with not your personal story, but the analogy that your metaphor with, okay, let's say God came in like the 19th century, and he was a white guy. I don't think that's a fair analogy. I think what would be a more fair analogy would be if God came back during that time period, and God was a Native American, or God was another group, because the Jews were not in power. They were under Roman occupation.
Okay, I see where you're going with that one. First, I had to throw you a little side eye first, but I see where you're going with that one.
Yeah, they don't have power. So like in like that time period, the whites would be the Romans. You know what I mean? So it would have to be a different group.
I got you. I understand that. If I ever use that analogy again, I'm gonna flip that, because I understand what you're saying, to put it in a closer contextual, to make it closer contextually. I see what you're saying.
The two groups would have to have like previous animosity and hatred towards each other too. You know? Like, I don't think African Americans and Native Americans ever did have.
Oh no. Yeah, there was some times, because the five civilized tribes, the so-called five civilized tribes, they bought African slaves as well. So it wasn't all love between.
There you go. So you can use it that way then. I guess I would just bring that up.
Yeah, they had to be like a Cherokee or Choctaw or Chickasaw or Creek in the example, because even though we had, the black people had a more friendly relationship with the Seminoles, with those other tribes, not so much. They bought slaves. Some of them were okay. Some of them, would hide you, and of course, you always got good people in every group that was against slavery. But yeah, to me, they were just as bad.
Right. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's all that I came up with, man. So I thought I'd come and tell you that that's what I came up with when I was talking with my family. Everything was God tests us, and
I understand.
He also did test the Roman too, and you have your view of it, and I just thought I'd bring it up to you because I heard it and I saw you were live.
I appreciate the fact that you thought about it more. Even though we still disagree, you thought about it more, and that's cool. That's good.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all I had for you. So anyway, have a great day, and stay blessed, man.
Thanks. You too. All right, we got Aram coming up.
That was a great conversation, actually.
Yes,
I saw your point, and I saw his point. I'm actually Muslim. I do believe in what Jesus says in the Bible. I will also give Jesus the benefit of the doubt on the perspective he was coming from. But I still saw your point completely, and I think he did a good job too, adding some extra perspective there. So I'm glad you see things that way, and you can have that conversation in a civilized manner.
Yeah, that's what we look for. I look forward to that. I used to not really like bringing people up because it just be a whole circle debate and sometimes get disrespectful. But I'm trying to just be a better host, and if somebody does get that way, I just kick them off.
Yeah. No, he did a good job too. Yeah, he did a good job. I was going to come up and kind of help them out from his perspective, you know what I mean? But he did a good. I don't believe Jesus is God, but I still believe Jesus is godly in a way that a normal human being is not. So, but I think I got your point. I think he got your point, and I think you saw his point as well. So.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that I can see I see his point, but not probably in the way that you're thinking. I see his point because God has to be good in his mindset So there has to be an alternative to why he would call her a dog, instead of just what the nuts and bolts of it is. And I get that with people who believe. It's just like people who believe in a candidate, or you believe in a singer or entertainer. When something negative comes out about them, you look for an alternative reason as to why. Otherwise, you have to question
100%.
your loyalty to them.
100%.
So I see why he has to. I understand the psychology of that.
And the same thing. I would look at it more as he was kind of testing her racism, her prejudice, given the animosity those two people had, to even get past, having to ask somebody who was an Israelite for help. You see what I'm saying? But I get where you're coming from too. I see your face.
Yeah, dude, because there's nothing there. There's nothing there that shows that this individual woman had any problems with Israelites, that she was racist in any shape.
We have some historical context already knowing what's going on with the Canaanites and the Israelites. So I think that's going to color, the way we see it, or the way I see it. There's already some historical context there.
So then I should be able to say that all white people are racist because we have some historical canon that demonstrates, in context, the racism of white people towards black people. Right?
As a regular person, yes, but as Jesus, no.
That's the bias. That's
100%. 1,000%. I would give Jesus the benefit of the doubt every time. 100%.
And I don't agree, but I understand why. Why that happens.
I got you. If it wasn't Jesus, I would be right there with you. But because it's Jesus, I'm like, I can't do that. Can't do it. So.
Okay, so you're Muslim, right?
Yeah.
All right. So would you give Siddhartha Gautama the benefit of the doubt?
Who?
The Buddha, the actual one, the one who started it.
Well, I mean, he's not a part of our, our teaching of who's a prophet or messenger of God or not. So he's not officially a part of that. If I did that, it would be me kind of moving outside of the normal idea of who's a messenger of God or not. Although I know there are some Muslims, they're very rare, who would see Buddha as a messenger of God to those people, but they're rare.
Okay.
They're very rare.
I was testing you because I've met a couple of those Muslims who see Buddha as a messenger of God.
I read Buddha's book too, but when it comes to Buddha, there's a lot that's attributed to him, and a lot that can't be necessarily verified. So I would be careful saying, what Buddha actually taught or not. You know what I mean? But I read the Gautama Siddhartha, the biography at an early age, so I know about him. But I know there's very few Muslims who look at Buddha as a messenger of God.
Yeah, and of course, the guy that I know who's a Muslim that gives that credit, he's Northern Indian.
Okay.
So
yeah, I don't like.
They have a closer relationship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not offended by the idea. I just can't take a stance on it.
No, but I understand. I mean, I know as a Muslim, you see Jesus as a prophet, right?
But for us, a prophet is more than like the way Christians tend to use prophets. Like the Bible's a little interesting. It's like you read like Samuel, I think it's 9:9. They used to say like seer, and then they started calling seers prophets. But like for a Muslim, that term prophet is more how the Bible uses the term anointed. Like
right.
like David and Jesus and Moses. You know what I'm saying? It's deeper than just somebody who can randomly give, see the future or give a prophecy. Somebody who has a direct connection to like the revelation of God.
Right. I just put it in the simplest terms. Like Jesus is, for the Muslim, Jesus is like he's like a big time prophet. Right.
Yeah, it's like the Prophet Muhammad and Jesus, to be honest with you, are like of the same status.
Right. They're on the same tier. They LeBron and Jordan and Kobe, all on the same tier.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
So
you hear a lot of Christians go, oh, Muslims just say he's just a prophet. Like that's not a low title for us.
Right. So that's why you have to give him that benefit of
yes, 100%. Yeah. I have no shame in it
either. I understand. I just can't. I just don't. And I can't.
I totally understand. I totally understand where you're coming from. And I don't, you know, I'm not offended by it because you do, because you look at it more, you're not going to necessarily give him that benefit of the doubt.
Right.
You're just looking at it from a worldly perspective.
No. Well, see, I hate that term now. You're looking at it from a worldly perspective. It's not a worldly perspective. It's just I'm looking at it from the perspective of what the book says. Now,
Yeah, well,
I know you don't view the New Testament. Well, the New Testament is viewed. How is it viewed? Let me just ask.
For Muslims, there's a difference, but in general, I'll tell you right now, in general, Muslims just kind of stay away from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But with New Testament, Old Testament. But if you get into the nitty gritty, we don't see the, like, you know, John, Luke, you know, those are like, they're called accounts of the gospel. Muslims believe that the gospel was only revealed to Jesus, God bless him, keep on himself. So the gospel is really only is the teachings of Jesus himself, not anything outside of that. You know what I'm saying? So those are like accounts that include Jesus' teachings. And some Muslims believe that they were corrupted. Some Muslims, like me, believe that the Quran does say that the teachings of Jesus are still there and can be relied on. And then some Muslims just kind of steer away from it altogether.
Okay.
So there are different levels of it when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to seeing the Bible. There are different levels.
And for some reason, I forgot what my question was.
You're all good.
I had a question and I completely forgot what it was. But I do have the reason why I forgot my question is because I have another question for you that actually pertains to the conversation that we're having today about atheism. Now, I don't know how much you're going to know about this. What country are you in?
U.S.
You're in the U.S. All right. Atheism is growing at a tremendous rate. Most of it is Christians walking away from Christianity. The allowance of information is one of the main reasons why people are walking away from Christianity. I know that there are people in Islam who have walked away from Islam in countries like America, in Europe, because it's easier for them. They don't have the laws. They don't have the restrictions of the laws. They don't have as much of a forced society. And I do know that there are secrets, groups of people in the more restrictive countries that are still becoming atheists, but of course they can't be as open to it. I find them on the internet, and you're not going to see them publicly. So, what are your thoughts? Not your thoughts? Have you seen that in the Muslim community?
I think in those countries, a lot of those countries that have been Muslim for a long time, and even like it gets deep when you start thinking about like Islamic law and what should be the restrictions of Islamic law and how like wide or forcefully should Islamic law be enforced. I mean, what you find in the Quran, you find it says that there's no coercion in religion, but then if there's no coercion in religion, that means people should not be, subject to punishments that they don't agree with, right? Outside of, just self-defense. So it gets a little tricky. All we know is historically we did have a development of something called Islamic law that was applied as, the law of the land. And one of the parts of Islamic law is that atheism is a no-no. It's like killing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people cannot openly be atheists in Muslim countries. And that's why even in places where people become Muslim or they come from Muslim backgrounds and they come to places where people can be openly atheists, you'll still see how visceral of a reaction they had to people becoming atheists. Like they have a very visceral reaction to it. Like me personally, I don't get offended by things. I kind of thought about things. I look at even Islamic history, look at all the people who were Muslim scholars. There's a big variety of thought, and schools of thought, and different ideas that even Muslim scholars have adopted. But if you look at it, some of them were in prison, some of them were executed. Some of their books are around. Sometimes you only know about them because there's some people who wrote books to refute them. So there's been a lot of schools, ways of thinking in Islam too over these 1,500 years pretty much. But But yeah, Muslims in general do not like it. Like, they don't like it when you go from Muslim to being Christian, and they definitely don't like it when you go from Muslim to atheist. Because, you know, for a Muslim, God is like it, you know, is the top, you know, everything. You're supposed to live for God. You know, and the reason why you can breathe is because of God. So, you know, for us, it's like, maybe you want to walk away from, like, even me personally, maybe you want to walk away from a religion, but to say there's no God, you know, that's just, I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair either. I can see saying I don't know if there's a God or not, but even for somebody to take a stance and say there is no God, a lot of times that's based on an emotion more than a fact, because you can't prove it one way or another.
That part. Okay, if you can't prove it one way or another, even though I had a different question, if you can't prove it one way or another, why accept it one way or another?
There's a leap of faith involved in believing in God, 1,000%. You know, to me, God makes sense. You know what I mean? But I can't prove God until the day of judgment, and everybody's like, oh yeah, God definitely exists. But I think God makes sense 100%, because I don't think organization comes from chaos. I don't think, you know, methodology comes from chaos, and we see organization in the world we live in.
No, we don't. Our world is not organized. Why do people keep saying that?
Your body is organized.
No, it's not. Our body has parts in it that we don't even use. Your body
has systems. Your body has systems.
Yeah, it has systems, but
it's organization.
As a business person, I've consulted with companies that have systems, but within their system is disorganized. They are surviving, they're functioning, but they're so in one contract, I stole $27 million in 3 days. They were supposed to give me 30 days to do it, right?
Okay.
I mean, they knew what we was doing. They were supposed to give me 30 days to do it. But in 3 days, when they saw that I was able to take $27 million out of their system, they were like, oh shit, stop, let's fix this now. Right?
100%. So all I'm saying is the general concept here is just that systems come from intelligence. So I believe that
why do they have to?
All systems come from intelligence. Now, if you find faults in the system, then maybe you can find faults in the intelligence that created the system. That's up to you. I look at the things that I can't fully understand in the systems of nature as I just can't fully understand it, because we know science over time at one point thinks, oh, this doesn't make any sense, and later on finds out it does. So my leap of faith is to see that there are systems both in how I'm created and how the world is created, and I believe there's a higher intelligence behind those systems, which I call God, which I believe is God.
We live in a system that's at any moment and has had evidence of major asteroid collisions destroying 90% of the life.
Systems were created.
We gotta.
That was part of the plan.
Part of the plan is the destruction of 98% of the species that's ever been on this planet.
100%, just like we pass away. That's part of the plan.
Part of the plan is children getting cancer.
That's part of the plan, 100%.
That's an evil ass plan to me.
I feel where you're coming from, but see, my idea of what this world is that it's not perfect systems here. So, for instance, this world that we live in it serves to show you that there's a creator. It also shows to show you that there's a life beyond this, and you can't live for this world.
But why?
So there's a good aspect to it.
Why would a perfect being need to create an imperfect world with some imperfect creatures to test them to see if they're worthy to worship him for eternity, when he could have just created the beings to worship him from eternity from the beginning?
So I don't necessarily agree with the narrative that you created. I disagree with some of the words that you used. So I don't think he needs to do that. He chose to do that. And the reasons why he chose to do that are as a wisdom that is beyond my comprehension. So that's why this is where the leap of faith comes.
And that's where the difference is. I don't see it as something beyond my wisdom of understanding. Because if I'm a perfect God, then my creations must be perfect.
Perfect. I got you.
I cannot create I can't create imperfection.
I see your logic, but what I would say is that everything, even the imperfection that we see, has a plan. So it might look like a perfect being creating something imperfect, but it all leads towards a perfect plan. So it's the complication of it. You know, sometimes things look complicated and like it don't make sense, but there is a bigger sense to it. And I think we have been granted enough intellectual power to understand that God exists and to make that leap of faith, although we haven't been granted enough intellectual power to understand every single detail of how this plan is supposed to play out.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't agree with that because I do understand at a higher level. So I said the thing about the perfect God making a perfect creation, right? Which then leads to the fact that there is no such thing as perfection, because all things have duality. All things have this opposites. So you cannot have a perfect God. You can't have. You can. There is nothing in all of creation, even beyond the creation that we've discovered, because there are levels of creation that we don't know exist.
100%.
Right? But even in that, nothing is ever perfect. There cannot be perfection because of duality, because there is a duality to all things. So
I think there is a perfection there, it's just not a perfection in the way that we always want to see perfection.
now, each book, each belief system has a perfection of heaven that is thoroughly described.
Oh, you're talking about when this world passes.
When this world passes, that's supposed to be the perfection, right?
Yeah, that's a different perfection, and that perfection is for everything to be good, and not to have that duality anymore. And the stage we're in now, it has a duality in order for us to perceive that we need to work to move to that other level. That's the way I see that.
Now, although I know what you're going to say, there is nothing in nature, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump what you're gonna say. There is nothing outside of nature, so there is no supernatural that is perfect. So since there is nothing in nature and there is no supernatural, because the supernatural is just the natural that we don't understand yet or haven't realized yet, there is no perfection in any of it. So there can never be a perfection. Even if we do exist in a conscious state of maintaining your self-knowledge into another realm, even in that realm, there is no perfection. This is why most religions have the war in heaven storyline. Because even in the heaven, there wasn't a perfection. There was a war, identifying the duality of all nature, even that to which you call the supernatural.
Well, I mean, I see where you're coming. I look at this perfection idea of more as like, what is God's purpose at this particular stage? So things are going to be created perfectly for the purpose God wants it to be. So, and in that story, based on like my religion, for instance, anything before what we would call the Day of Judgment, and then moving over into when this world passes and the new world begins, that perfection is going to look different than the perfection on the other side. Which is why we would say when we use it's weird using this word perfection, because you can look at perfection as all good, or you can look at perfection as serving a purpose completely. You see what I'm saying? So it really depends on how we're looking at perfection in the moment. So it gets tricky. It gets a little tricky with the word, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. It's not that when I say, for instance, things in this world are imperfect, they perfectly serve a plan, but it's there to show us that it's not going to be like all good in the way that we want it now. But when we move on to that next world, it will be all good in the way that we want it.
I don't think it perfectly shows the plan either. The plan is all kind of jacked up. All right. Now, and I'm gonna try to do this from the Muslim perspective, and you're gonna have to help me with this one because it's been 30 years since I studied Islam. Okay.
Don't worry.
All right. Y'all have Adam and Eve story, right?
100%. Yeah.
All right. So Adam and Eve. Adam supposed to have been in a perfect garden, right?
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I know in the Christian way that's what the story goes, but in the Islamic story it goes the same way, right?
Even before you jump out, let's still let you continue. Even with the storyline and how it ends up going, this was all, God knew this from the beginning anyway.
So he planned on putting a tree there to tempt them and putting a serpent in there to tempt them, knowing that they will fail.
He definitely allowed that. They were in a state where they could have enjoyed that state, without any problems there. And then you have this serpent. In our understanding, the serpent is actually, I don't want to get too much into details, but the devil's interpreted in the mainstream way that the devil is interpreted in Islam is that he was a
jinn.
So yeah, jinn or a spirit. We'll say a spirit, but not an angel. But he was of the level of the angels.
Mm-hmm.
I would say if you read deeply and you read what the Quran says, he was an actual angel. But he ended up rebelling against God because he thought he was better than mankind that God was going to create.
Right.
So then he took it upon himself to try to corrupt mankind as much as possible. And that first, intent to corrupt was in the garden with Eve and eating of the tree that they weren't supposed to eat.
So was his plan perfect?
God's plan is always perfect. So
it was a perfect plan to allow for them to fail.
It was up to them to fail, correct, and then gave them a chance to rebound from that.
How is it up to them to fail?
Free will. We have free will. It's up to us.
Okay, so let me ask you. All right, so we got free will, is what you say, right? Now, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
How old are you? Oh, it doesn't matter how old you are. Do you have kids?
Yeah.
You got kids. When they were 1 year old, did they know the difference between good and evil?
No.
So at 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, when they don't know the difference between good and evil, or only what you taught them thus far at that time frame, how would they know that they were being lied to? How would they know what death is? I don't know how old your kids are, but
it doesn't mention that you will die in the Quranic story. It's not.
The Quran doesn't say you're going to die. Okay.
No, it's not that we would like rebuke that part either, but that's just not part of the Islamic narrative per se.
But how would they know if they don't know the difference between good and evil?
Uh-huh.
How would they know that what they were doing was evil? Because that God told them.
Of all evil, really, is to obey or disobey God. It is to disobey God. So if God gives you a command, you follow it. So they didn't have to know much more than that. All they had to know is God said, "Don't touch that," so you don't touch that.
But you got another angelic being who would appear to be like an emissary from this God. Why wouldn't they listen to him too? Why wouldn't they?
I get what you're saying, but it literally, it's weird. Maybe if you take it as the serpent, this person's not necessarily appearing as God. If you look at the Quranic story, actually, it says, "Oh, God only didn't want you to touch that because He didn't want you to be, like the angels." So they're being sold a story to disobey God. Mm-hmm. And literally in the story, it's saying, "Oh, God didn't want you to do that because He didn't want you to do this." So basically, in the Quranic story, they're not being told to follow God. They're being told that God was trying to limit them. In this case, it's Eve, but it ended up it's both of them. But that God didn't want them to do that in order to limit them. But you can have much, much more if you do that. So at the point that they're being told, God told you not to do it anyway, it doesn't matter if God told you not to do it to limit you. God still told you not to do it, so you hold those limits.
Okay, so you're supposed to obey God, right? Because God has a plan. So
yeah, I believe God has a plan, but just the point being, God told you not to do something. You trust God's authority over everybody's authority. Somebody come to you and say, "Oh, don't follow. God just don't want you to do that because you can be much, much more." You don't follow that because literally that person in there them trying to dupe you, They literally told you that God told you not to do it.
So if a child is dying of cancer, and you said earlier that's God's perfect plan, that child shouldn't seek medical help. And
no, I didn't say that.
Well, you're saying that the child is dying of cancer, that's God's perfect plan, right?
When you're in this world, listen, this is though that's different. Now you're in this world. We're jumping out of the times of, you know.
What it shouldn't matter what time frame it is.
It does, because in this world, God tests us. You know what I mean? So it's not like if you don't have any way to help yourself, right? You accept.
Wait. What's the difference between the worlds? What's the difference between Adam and Eve's world and to this world?
He also tells you to help yourself. So he doesn't say. So when you come across different things in this world, trials, tribulations, right? Like you just don't go, oh, this is happening to me, so I'm just going to accept that the way it is. God will still offer you ways to help yourself, and whenever you can help yourself, you help yourself. Like that's one of the things in the Quran. Actually, the word is taqwa. It means to protect yourself from harm and evil. You do that in this world. God mandates you to do that in this world, no matter what.
So when somebody is sick and you pray for them, but God kills them, were you praying against God's will?
No.
God just said no.
Yeah, that was God's choice to take them, and He has that authority.
He has the authority to take them. So he has the authority for a child dying of cancer, that regardless of your prayers.
Thing that happens, if I get bit by a snake and I'm in the middle of the desert and I'm gonna pass away because of that venom, that was God's authority to take my life and to let that happen. And
you see that as him fulfilling God's plan.
That is because I'm gonna pass anyway. So that was the way I was gonna go.
All right, so let me ask you this question for the perfect plan.
But you understand when you ask me about this perfect plan, you do understand that I believe I don't have the intellectual power to accomplish God's perfect plan in every single way.
I know, but I want to hear your perspective though.
Okay.
So, a person who doesn't believe in Allah, if I die today, what happens to me?
So you don't believe in God at all? In your heart, you reject the God.
I reject the gods of the Bibles. Yeah, God of the Abrahamic religions. Yes,
I want to be clear.
I reject all the gods of man.
Yeah. Cool. So that's how you.
Wait, but no, you got wait. You got to be specific though, because as a Muslim, Christians ain't going to hell, right? I mean heaven, right?
Some Christians are going to heaven.
So Christians and Jews are going to heaven. What about Jews?
Some Christians and Jews are going to heaven. Correct.
The Christian, I have never heard that from a Muslim. You please explain that.
Yeah, sure. So if you read the Quran, basically we believe in the God of Abraham. But obviously, God predates Abraham. We believe that Adam, or the original human being that existed, knew of God. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just about Abraham's descendant or Abraham's faith. We believe that all human beings around the world originally believed in God and had that knowledge. Okay, and then they were corrupted over time. And God sent prophets and messengers to fix those corruptions. So Jesus and Moses and all the Israelite prophets were God's messengers that came to correct their mistakes during that time. So anybody who is loyal to God, the supreme God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and knows of him and doesn't reject that God in their heart based on what they know, they get paradise.
So if I believed in Brahma, then that means
the God of the universe, Brahma. That's the word, Brahma, right?
Yeah.
And to the best of your knowledge, you were loyal to God. You go to paradise, 100%.
Okay, and that goes for every religion. So if I was believing Oda Mare,
of course,
I get to go to paradise.
1,000%. The only thing that ends you up in the hellfire for Muslims is if you know of God and you rebuke God based on what you know.
Never heard that from them. I've always heard from the Muslims that was teaching me back in the early 90s. And I'm not talking about like Nation of Islam Muslims.
Yeah.
This was I went to Saudi Arabia then.
Okay.
So it was, you got to believe in Allah, and Muhammad as his prophet.
Well, they were encouraging you. So basically, at the point that you know of, Allah is just the word in Arabic for God. Even the Christian Arabs and the Georgia Arabs say Allah. It's like saying Dios in Spanish.
Right.
It's just that's the word. It's just Muslims prefer Arabic, just like Jews prefer Hebrew. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get too caught up in the word. You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you.
But once so as a Muslim, their duty was to introduce you to the knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Into that realm. And once you've been introduced into that realm, then they're going to be like, okay, well, now that you know of this, you see what I'm saying? You need to bear witness that there's no God but God and that Muhammad is his messenger.
Okay. Well, you know what? You answered my main question without actually me asking the question. Because I was going to ask you, since Muhammad didn't come till what, 600, 500, 500?
Yeah, he's born in 570.
Born in 570, didn't really start teaching to the 600s, right? That all those people who never heard of Islam.
They never heard of Muhammad, 100%.
But they believed in another. So this is kind of like how in the Jewish religion, it says in the Deuteronomy that God has written himself on the hearts of men and so on and so forth.
100%. You look at the Quran, literally it says that God took all of the children of Adam before we came to this earth and said, who is your Lord? And they say, you are our Lord. So basically, it's just like that. Like God has written his name on the hearts of all mankind.
Okay, like I said, you go only. I gotta call Umar. Umar was my Muslim scholar in Atlanta. I gotta call him and ask him this question.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I've never ever heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, if you research deeply, I mean, a lot of Muslims, unfortunately, don't always read enough. So I get in a lot of arguments with Muslims too.
Oh yeah.
Because they don't read it like they should. But even before the Prophet Muhammad, the Muslims believed that there were Arabs during that time who were called the Hunafa. Hanif in Arabic means like rightly guided, and that they believed and they professed to be on the religion of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
They never knew the Prophet Muhammad. You know what I'm saying? We believe that every follower of every Israelite prophet that followed them to the T was rightly guided. And if you look in the Quran, you see what it actually says. Well, a lot of Christians argue with Muslims. It gets down to like what's the definition of gospel versus Torah, but it literally says that the Christians have the gospel and the Jews have the Torah that we revealed, and if they follow it, they would be on right guidance.
Yeah, see, every Muslim I've ever talked to is like, has been like, you're gonna go to Muslim hell.
Yeah,
you're not there permanently, but you're going.
That's not even a justifiable position unless you just told them, I don't want to know nothing about Muhammad or the Quran. You know what I'm saying? Unless you told them that, they should have never said anything like that out of their mouth.
No, I actually gave Islam a try, but
okay.
I just can't do it.
Well, that's cool. You've seen when you get to the nitty gritty, if you look at the Bible, through and through, when you hit Islam, you see a very similar religion.
Oh no, Islam is very similar to Christianity. I agree with that. No.
So if you have this is why me personally, when I come across Muslims that seem to have a deep dislike and hatred for Christians or for Jews, I'm like, it's no way they can be good Muslims. It's just no way.
Let me ask you a question. Well, I'm not asking this question. One of my persons from YouTube is asking a question. He said, ask him about the 3 questions from the grave.
Yeah.
What the hell is
that?
So
he's talking about, so according to, this is not in the Quran, but according to Hadith, you have 2 angels that you meet in the grave. One is called Munkir and one is called Nakir. And then they literally will ask you, who is your God? Who is your prophet? And I forget what the last question is. But I forget what the last question is. I don't think it's what is your religion, but it's one. It might be that, but yeah, you have to answer who is your God, who is your prophet. So I don't know all the hadith that talk about that, but obviously somebody who goes to the grave and if they ask who is your prophet, you say Jesus. Who's your God? They should say God. Who is your prophet? You should say God, whatever language that is. And I forget what the last question is, but if you follow that prophet, you're fine. You are 100% fine.
Okay. So Now, this is my question. Because most people don't understand what atheists and slash agnostics, because I put them in the same category, which is the category I fall into myself.
Okay.
Right?
You're atheist agnostic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meaning that I don't have enough, there is not enough evidence for me to believe in a God,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm open to the evidence of a God.
So you believe that there could be a God or there could not be a God?
I'm open to it if evidence is produced that there is a God. Now,
But you believe that? Yeah, I get you. So that's why, like, agnostic would be like, that's why agnostic is you. There could be a God, there couldn't be a God. You don't take an opinion. You see what I'm saying?
right.
You're taking an opinion.
Atheists,
you're saying that there's no God.
now atheists don't necessarily say, if you listen to, if an atheist was truly explaining the thought process, even in atheism, because it is theists who has determined that atheists say that there is no God.
I've heard atheists say there's no God.
Right. Now, agnostics are a little bit more open than a hardcore atheist person, and you do have hardcore atheists who say there is no God.
Mm-hmm.
But 99% of the atheists that I've had longer conversations with will get to the point where they say, well, the reason why I don't believe that there is no God because there is no evidence of a God.
Okay.
But if evidence did present itself, they would then accept this, that there is a God.
Okay. Well, I would say,
but how does,
there's no evidence to prove a God, there's no evidence to prove there isn't a God. So somebody who doesn't, I understand people who say, I'm not even going to waste my time thinking about it. Those are the people I understand, because you can't prove that there is or there isn't. Like, you can look at what makes sense and make a leap of faith either towards God or against God, depending on what. But to be an atheist is a leap of faith, and to be a theist is a leap of faith. To say I don't know either way and not even bother with it, that's the real. Those are the people who are really true to me in a sense, because they're like, I'm not going to choose either way because I'm not going to make a leap of faith on something that I feel like there's no hardcore evidence for.
Okay, so maybe like what this guy Christopher Malcolm is saying, what Christopher is saying on Facebook. He said atheists deny the existence or potential of a God. Agnostic take a stance of open-mindedness. Atheism is closer to a religion than agnosticism. And I was saying his statement because maybe the people that I've talked to aren't true hardcore atheists.
Okay.
And that they are more agnostic, but they just take on the title of atheist.
But I think a lot of times they do that to trigger theists. So you find a lot of people who are atheists. It's kind of like, not to get into the crazy world here, but it's kind of like, when you talk about trying to do rainbow marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, marriage itself is comes from a religious context, right? So people who are Judeo-Christians or Muslims or religious people believe in this concept of marriage. Even the people who get married today, they're lukewarm religious people. They just, they still follow it. Like, you come across people call themselves cultural Muslims or cultural Christians, which I think is BS. But they still want to hold on to aspects of religion, and one of those is marriage, for instance. But in a society where two people, can get together, 2, 3, 4, however you want, I don't care, can get together and nobody's going to stop them. There's no point in throwing your relationship in the face who traditionally believe that marriage is religious and saying this is marriage too. There's no point in that. All that is to do is to trigger traditionalist people. So I feel like a lot of atheists are the same way. Like, they're really agnostics, but because they find a lot of the beliefs of theists to be ridiculous, or maybe they were hurt by theists, or maybe they felt like theists did them wrong, or certain religious systems did them wrong.
Don't do
they
that.
Want to be like, atheists, because then you tell them they're going to hell, they get mad. If you're atheist and somebody tells you you're going to hell, why would you get mad at that if you don't even believe in hell?
Because you're a person that's judging me. That's like you walking up to me and saying that, I think your eyes, I think you're ugly.
Like, if you think I'm ugly, oh well. Like, I'm not meant to be pretty for everybody.
Yeah, but the fact that you felt bold enough to walk up to me and tell me that you think I'm ugly, I'm gonna look at you and tell you that your head shaped like a melon.
Cool.
You know,
you can come right back.
If you came to me
if you told me literally like a dragon is gonna come eat your head off, you know what I mean? Because you don't believe what I believe. If somebody told me that, I would look at them and be like, whatever. Like I wouldn't even care. Like it's ridiculous on his face. I would be like at the most, I would be like, oh, this person has a mental illness. So if I were an atheist and somebody was telling me I was going to hell, at the most, I would be like, oh, this person is mentally ill, and I would keep it pushing.
And I think that most atheists do that. But everybody has their own triggers, right? So it's like this one gentleman on Facebook. He loves to call me. He knows what my name is, but he'd rather call me a different name. And for me, I don't allow anybody to name me, especially another man. You're not going to name me. You know, I've had this, and this is not just in this arena. You know, I had a dude in my cigar lounge gonna tell me what he's gonna call me, gonna try to give me a nickname. No, like, no, the hell you not. So we all have our triggers.
Okay, you don't like nicknames.
Well, I don't like. I tell people my name is Renz, R-E-N-Z, because that's the nickname I gave myself. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Nobody else is going to give me a nickname. I've had grown men that when I tell them my name is Renz, then they want to start calling me Renzi. And I'm like, you're a grown ass man sounding feminine as hell calling me Renzi. Don't.
Well, you guys have some personal triggers there.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We all have some triggers. So like, I can walk past the Hebrew Israelites and just smile and laugh when they trying to yell at me about, what's your nationality, and I just keep it moving. Yeah. But there are other Christians and Muslims and every other person of color that walks past them, and they say that to one of them, bam, they on them because that triggers them.
Hebrew Israelites get disrespectful on purpose.
Yeah. But everybody has their triggers, and I think there are some people who are atheists / agnostics who they're triggered by people trying to tell them what their fate is, or push their religion on them. Because
I get being triggered by somebody trying to push their religion on you. I get that. Like for instance, like me being a Muslim, obviously there are some things like a Christian is going to tell me, you're going to hell because you don't believe Jesus is God and then die on the cross for your sins. And I might be a little triggered by that, but I know to be more mature and be like, well, that's your belief. And then if I try to engage them and I realize they can't even engage, then I'm just going to let that go. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to be bothered by somebody imposing their belief system on me that I don't believe in and that they can't even like have an interaction about. You see what I'm saying? I'm just not going to be triggered by that.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying about the atheists who do get triggered by that, is that we all have something that will trigger us. I mean, no matter how highly elevated I think my conscience is, because I am not perfect, there are certain things you can say or do around me and it's going to trigger a certain response that I don't necessarily want that to be the response, but it's going to be a response.
Yeah, you have boundaries, like, especially you talking about your name and what to call you. Like, if that person respects you, you know what I mean, and wants to be in your presence, then they're going to have to respect your boundaries. You know what I'm saying? That's a human thing. Point blank, period. If you're going to be around me, you need to respect my boundaries. So, but when it comes like people on the street, or like if I believe somebody in my circle is going to the hellfire if they don't believe a certain thing, and I told them that already, and they said, you know what, don't tell me that anymore. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not going to tell them that anymore, or I'm gonna choose not to be in their presence anymore if I feel like that belief is so important to me that I need to tell them. You see what I'm saying? And they're not going to accept it. Then I'm going to be like, all right, well, this is where we're going to have to split, because I'm not going to be around a person who's going to get triggered, you know what I mean, by my belief when I tell them. You see what I'm saying? We can't be around each other. That's cool. Like, everybody can't be around each other.
Yeah, and that's all I was saying about the atheists who get triggered when somebody tell them they're going to hell.
I just find it. I think it comes from a deeper place, like religions that they grew up in, and they were told, that they were going to go to hell for certain things. And, things you learn as a child that you have an emotional connection to, can really trigger you. You know what I'm saying? So when they come across people telling them they're going to hell, they have a visceral reaction to that because of something that they experienced as children. And we all do to a certain extent, but we all have a responsibility to also get over childhood trigger.
I myself went through a phase of that because so one of the reasons why the atheism / agnosticism has grown so much is because of the internet, right? We have access to information we didn't have before. When I was growing up, there was no internet. So I was in the library and sending letters to universities and the Library of Congress to get information. Not many people were doing that. So in my community, and that's one of the other reasons why atheism has grown, we're not now just culturally biased based on the small communities that we were in. We've expanded to more of a global world. So me and only one other guy was being tormented in Marietta for not being Christian. The other gentleman, he's Muslim now, but we were being tormented for that. I was called a demon. I was called a devil. I was told I was going to hell. I got
told that too. I grew up as a Muslim in Philadelphia before it was popular, because now they all get Muslim now. But before it was popular, I got told all that stuff.
So in the 90s, when I became a grown ass man, the 90s up until about the early 2000s, if you had just told me that I'm going to hell if I don't believe in your stuff, you got a visceral reaction from me. I would literally crush your religion at that point. Like the peaceful conversation we're having now, it was totally different then. I would do yeah, and it took me a while to pull myself out of that thought process.
Yeah, I mean that's a real thing. I don't try to like downplay those childhood triggers, because I experienced it with other things, like random things. Like I remember, like when I was a kid, when we would go on road trips, my dad would get stressed out when he would drive past the big old trucks, just because, they could, accidentally move over and like knock you off the road, or maybe he experienced something. And experiencing that stress as a child, I manifested that as an adult. You know what I'm saying? And then at some point I had to be like, why am I letting this bother me? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I get that 100%. Like, just with a small example like that, I can obviously extrapolate that to, you're dealing with people who are ridiculing you and putting pressure on you because of beliefs that you have. Yeah. So I totally get that. But again, as adults, you know what I mean? None of us, have a legitimate excuse to continue to allow ourselves to be ruled by those childhood triggers. We have to grow past that.
Oh, we do. I have a rule that, and this is my own rule, doesn't have to be anybody else's, that from 30 to 40, that is your time frame to come into yourself and be yourself. Somewhere in between 30 and 40, you either become a grown-ass man or a grown-ass woman, and stop allowing for the things of your past to dictate your personality and who you are. So after that time frame, you can't blame your mom and your daddy. You can't blame the church. You can't blame the mosque. You can't blame the imam. None of that bullshit. It's all on you, right? You've had ample time of self-discovery.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. There is that time, but a lot of people don't grow out of that. A lot of people don't think for themselves. Right. And one of the things about people who walk away from these religions, some of them may have started from a basis of church hurt, or in your case, mosque hurt.
Okay, either way.
But at some point, that hurt created it created the critical thinking. It created the investigating.
Hopefully.
Well,
because some people stay in that hurt, man.
Well, no, even within their hurt, because I've dealt with hundreds of people in coaching them, even within their hurt, they start questioning and saying like, these genocides, it don't make sense. These selling off of daughters don't make sense. They start seeing that moral decay, right? And start questioning that. Then they start looking at the archaeological evidence and start saying, well, this could not have happened. This exodus out of Egypt, that didn't happen. There is zero evidence of that, and actually the evidence points against it. All right.
Well, you know I'm gonna disagree with you there, but go ahead.
I know you're gonna disagree, but you can disagree all you want to, but
I mean,
there's no evidence of an exodus.
Well, I'll tell you right now, from an archaeological standpoint, I haven't done all that research, so I can't have a back and forth with you about that. I just can't.
And see, even though, and see, I started asking questions not because of hurt. You may want to categorize it as hurt. So let me tell you why I started asking questions. I grew up dirt ass poor, right? Like no food in the house, sometimes no furniture except for a bed. Right? When the pastor said that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the gates of heaven, and he held up a sewing needle, as a poor kid, I was determined at 9 years old I wasn't going to be poor.
Gotcha.
So now this man is telling me that if I become rich, I'm going to hell. That bothered me. Now I don't claim that as hurt. Because my mindset now for the next year or so, I was like trying to figure out how to get a camel through the eye of a needle.
Well, you know, you misunderstood that.
I didn't I was mistaught until I went to Israel, and I actually saw, well, it was kind of cool. A week prior to going to Israel, I was in Oman. I saw a camel, and then I went to Israel, and I saw the eye of a needle, and I was like, a camel can easily walk through this damn thing. And I had somebody explain it to me when I was there.
I've been to Israel, so what eye of a needle are you talking?
So you know so you've been to Jerusalem then, right?
Yeah, I was a long time ago.
So when you pass through, there's a Muslim market right before you get to one of the old walls, and in order to pass out of the Muslim market, you go through an eye of a needle.
It's not the Jaffa Gate.
Is that the small one? There's a small one that's only about 4 feet high, but this one was like 8 feet high and about 6 feet wide. And it's at a market. I can see the market in my mind because I haggled this dude for this backpack.
Always there. I mean, I always understood that eye of a needle thing just being like, you know, because it's one thing, like there's like being comfortable and having what you need, you know what I mean? And then there's being rich. Like, you know, I mean, there are people who are like rich, like who got real money.
Yeah.
And we know a lot of times what they do with their money. So, like, to me, it's not so much a condemnation of, you know, having things. It's a condemnation of having so much and then waste so much that like other human life just becomes like meaningless to you. You see what I'm saying? And you just waste your money in ways that are not okay. Because, you know, the more money you have, the less it means to you.
Okay, I don't see it that way. I saw it as a lesson of you can't be in love with your materialistic things.
Yeah, and there's another that the love of money is the root of all evil. Which a lot of people say money is the root of all evil.
Right.
But it's not money that's the root of all evil. It's love of money.
Exactly. So, you know, but that started and I didn't realize this until I was 20 years old. So I got a 11-year gap. So, but in that 11-year gap, I was asking a lot of questions about a whole bunch of different things, getting kicked out of churches, pastors kicking me out because I would question them, and most of them had no answers for it. So so back to the thing, I didn't view that as church hurt. Maybe I was hurt that they couldn't answer the question, or I was disappointed that they couldn't answer the question.
What I was talking about, I don't see it you. Like, I wouldn't say you. We can't say all atheists are the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I see some twisted atheists. You know what I mean? I've seen some twisted. So that hurt, I think, can do is it can either set you on a journey to be open-minded and to read and to think more. But for some people, it can lead down a spiral of like hate that comes from that disappointment and hate that comes from that hurt. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, that happens.
All atheists are the same.
That happens when people, you know, the pastor essay them or the deacon does, and that person develop a hatred for the whole thing.
Too. You know, like for instance, I know a lot of people who, like when I started my journey of questioning, I went from like kind of more of a Sunni Muslim to a Quranist Muslim. Now, I don't know if you've been on TikTok too much. You run across the Quranists. I used to openly call myself a Quranist. I don't anymore for various reasons, and a lot of Quranists don't call themselves Quranists, even though they are. But they are some of the most intolerant, like hateful people of other Muslims that you can come across because of the rejection that they felt from other, Sunni Muslims, or what you would call even Shia, but other Muslims. And I'm just not with that. You see what I'm saying? Like, I can disagree with them, but I don't have to be hating on them and telling them, that they are held down like they would want to tell me that I'm held down. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't agree with that type of twisted type of thinking.
Yeah. And one of the problems that I had with most religions, with the Abrahamic religions as well, is something that Carrie just said on TikTok. She said that they don't like questions. The pastor told me once I needed a husband to explain it to me.
Oh, that's
and that's what the Bible tells you. That's what Paul says.
100%.
And the thing about it is throughout the Bible, and if you were to go through all 2,000 videos that I've ever made, they're not on YouTube. There are a considerable number of those videos that I made where I talk about how what's in the Bible, the Old Testament and New Testament, demonstrates this guy's hatred towards women, because women are merely just property and have no sense of agency in this book. And that was one of the big issues that I had growing up with this book, is that I love my mother and my grandmother, and the fact that this book is telling me that they and my aunts and my cousins don't have agency, or there was a time frame where they certainly didn't have we got it now. They had more agency growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They had more agency because of the laws of America. But as far as the Abrahamic stories, they don't have agency. And then when I started in the Marine Corps, traveling around the world, and I go to some of these countries, like when I went to Saudi Arabia, the only time frame the American women had agency is when they was on their little compound. But as soon as they step outside their compound, they had to adhere to the Saudi laws. How they dress and not being able to drive.
So I personally, from a personal standpoint and from a religious standpoint, I have an opinion on this that it's not that it's anti-feminist completely. It's not that I don't believe that women have agency, but I do believe that their natural emotionalism and the state, just how their hormones are, like the way that reflects in their ability to think. I think they are limited by that emotionalism, and that they have limits on their ability to use their rationality because of that emotionalism. And I think even instinctually they have a certain kind of solipsism that actually doesn't allow them to have a lot of empathy and put themselves and see things from a perspective that doesn't directly impact them in some type of way. So when it comes to the Bible, I mean, Old Testament, that's a big book, so I can't pretend to really say what the Bible has to say about women from front to back. You know what I mean? But I do think that the limitations that traditional religion, based on the Bible, based on the Quran, has put on women, I think there are some excesses for sure. But I think they were meant to address the actual problems that come about from that, I'll say the general, because not everybody's 100%, but that general emotionalism and solipsism that can really do damage to society, when women have full agency and are seen as equals, like, to men in all ways. Like, I think that becomes problematic.
What about a woman choosing her own husband for herself?
I give you that. Let's go with that. If you look at the way women choose the men, on their own. If you notice, a lot of times women choose very problematic men. Like, we complain about it in the Black American community all the time, and it ain't just the Black American community. You look at the white American community, like, women love bad boys, right? There's a reason for that. It's a cave woman instinct. You know what I mean? It's basically you want to pick a man that physically and psychologically shows enough aggression, right? That would guarantee your success in the jungle, right? But it's an instinct, like we all have instincts that can be very counterintuitive, not counterproductive, is the word I'm looking for. Very counterproductive. So it's not that I don't believe that women should have the right to say yes or no. But even if you look at how women over time have chosen their mates, they never chose their mates by themselves. Their families were always involved. But even with that said, for men, their families were involved too in the choosing of mates. There's a lot of things that we do now that go against our hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that are causing us problems today. Like, we don't live in tight-knit communities anymore. Clans, like families, extended families, all that has kind of fallen apart. And we actually, we actually do need that, you know what I mean? Because we evolved with it. It's in our DNA. And the more we get away from it, the more dysfunctional we become.
I hear you, but I have a huge disagreement. And the first part of the disagreement is the fact that if we also look at the way that men generally choose, the majority of men generally choose their woman, they're not choosing a woman based on her character, based on her ability to be a wife or ability to be a mother. Generally, men choose a woman. Is she pretty? Does she have a good pum pum? Is a boom boom looking good? Is the tatas looking good? We choose based on the physical beauty of a woman. That is instinctual, and that is
and it can be very problematic.
It is hugely problematic because now you don't know if that woman has the character to be a good mother or not, to be a good partner or not.
And that goes to what I was saying a little bit.
So shouldn't men agency be taken?
Well, 100%. The mechanism in place, I would say, for how men would choose mates too, was generally because of the way people were raised. People had fixed roles. So in the past, men didn't really have to worry about whether a woman knew her role or not. He could just focus on that physicality part because women were raised to be a certain way. You know what I mean? So now it is problematic in the era where women are not raised in a certain way.
Not just raised; those were the law. If you think about it, it was the law.
Yeah, I agree with you. But culture and law
are culture and law are inseparable. And in some cases, culture, law, and in most cases, especially back in the day, culture, law, and religion were all inseparable. And so women didn't have a choice but to live the life that they lived.
Exactly. So men didn't really have to worry about that. They could just base it on the attractiveness of the woman. Or if we even take it to caveman times, if we're doing caveman rules, then that man could force that woman to act a certain way. You know what I mean? And there were no repercussions for that, because that becomes the law.
And I'm glad you brought that part up, because in the book of Leviticus, it states that if a young woman who has not been betrothed to a man is SA'd by another man, that man pays the father 50 pieces of silver, and now the victim has to marry her essayist.
100%.
That kind of thinking and that kind of control takes away. That's the level of agency. I understand what you're saying about certain people. I ain't gonna say just women. Certain people shouldn't be allowed to become leaders. I'm not trying to be political, but this our current president is the most.
I'm talking about my boy.
He is the most emotionally driven, triggered president I have ever seen from multiple countries.
That's my homie. Well, that's besides the point.
But you cannot deny that this man, and trust, I have met world leaders in the 90s from so many different countries, from ambassadors all the way up. Well, let me say from generals all the way up. And this man is he is trigger happy and emotionally bent, right? No, he is.
I don't know if I want to. I get where you're coming from. I just don't know what I want to fully debate his personality at this point.
And there are plenty of men who are in leadership positions, and they make emotional decisions.
100%. I'm not gonna say I would never say every man is I say man.
Now I do.
But when it comes to families, like I don't know. Even in my personal experience, like whenever I've dealt with women, I've dealt with women who have good leadership characteristics in especially in certain situations where they're expected to perform. In professional situations where they're being paid, they can put on a good act. But I mean, in my opinion, what I've mostly dealt with women, they have an ability to go to an emotional place that defies logic and rationality.
Yeah, now I will give you that. I say that quite often. I also have another channel where I talk about relationships. And yes, biologically, we are hard-coded that in general, not all, but in general, men are more logical, women are more emotional. Now,
and even beyond that point,
but I don't.
But even when it comes to loyalty, for instance, to the family, like it's always a good example that people make, and it has to do with the whole independent woman thing. When women first have been asked if they won the lottery versus men if they won the lottery, or women who get promotions versus men who get promotions, right? Women who win the lottery, when they say they're gonna leave their man and go off and travel the world and just abandon the man. And men who win the lottery and get promotions, they have a natural instinct. They want to do better for their family. They're gonna make things better for their women. They're gonna hold down that family even more. Which is why we're in a crisis now where women make just as much as men do, and we're in a divorce crisis. We're in a marriage crisis because when women have money and they feel like they are equal to men, they want to be totally independent of those men. They want to take care of no man, and they break up the families, and this breaks up society.
I understand why you think that way. I do, because 84% of divorces in America are now being initiated by women. Women don't have to depend on a man for substance like they used to. So I understand why you think that way, but I think that it goes a lot deeper because you do also have a lot of men who are abusive, either physically or mentally.
I don't think we have a lot of men that are that.
A lot of them.
I think
especially,
but that's the excuse that.
Especially emotionally. Emotionally.
Nah, women are more abusive emotionally than men are, in my opinion. But
pure opinion. It may fall into abuse. I would say women are more manipulative emotionally than men are.
Abusive,
but that's why I preface it by saying that you may see this as abuse, and I can see how it can be. Relationships are like the most difficult. The reason why I did a relationship channel, because relationships are the most difficult thing to deal with, because you're expecting two people from two totally different universes to be able to figure it out. And most people are lazy as hell and think that once I get married, then I figured it out. Or they think that whatever I did to get the person, now that I got them, I ain't got to keep doing it. Most people don't realize they got to work for it.
You said two totally different universes. Did you mean that just as individual people, or did you mean that as male versus female? I just want to know.
Individual people, because like I live in my own universe right now. You live in your own universe. Everything that happened to you earlier today before our universes collided, I have no idea, right? And you have no idea of mine. And when we depart, you will go off into your own universe and I go off into my own universe. That's what I mean. And we've been raised differently. We've had different experiences, and now we're expected to merge together, right? And especially when you got people, it becomes even more difficult so I dated this girl from Philadelphia, right? Since you're from Philly. She crazy as hell.
They all crazy.
And thank you. For me, from my Southern mentality, every Northern woman is crazy as hell.
Yeah.
And they too damn masculine for me to deal with.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Now, that's just my universe. A dude from up north, he's accustomed to that.
No, we think they're crazy too.
But y'all know how to handle it better.
Well, you don't want to know how we have to handle
And y'all, and I do, because I hear the stories. Y'all handle it in the same aggression that y'all receive, y'all return. And sometimes y'all start the fucking aggression in order to preempt it, or however. It's crazy. It makes no sense to me. You know, the best time that I have is when my wife cuddles all up on me. She crazy.
You know, y'all Georgia folks ain't much better. You old school, but I lived in Georgia for a while and I was shocked.
Because Atlanta, if you went to Atlanta, is filled with a whole bunch of Northerners.
I wasn't in Atlanta actually. I was in Augusta.
Then where?
Augusta.
I didn't even know that place exists. But
now take 20 out east. You gonna hit it? Don't act like you don't know what that said.
Odessa?
No, like Augusta, right on the.
Oh, Augusta.
South Carolina. Yeah.
Oh, it's a bunch of y'all there in Augusta too. Y'all messed up my cities. My whole state is messed up because y'all.
Oh,
Any city got that. But anyway, the thing is, go back to the original. One of the things that caused me to start questioning, another one of the things that caused me to question a lot of these religions is the fact of how women are treated in the religion, and how that religion was used in order to treat women from as far back as we have recorded history, up until secular countries started to change all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think the story of women's mistreatment is exaggerated, and I think there were limitations put on women that we don't want to accept today because we want to see women and men as equal. But I think, like, I hate to use a bad example, but it's just kind of like when you meet a woman, almost every woman you meet, you know, her boyfriend was abusive, right? So when the previous boyfriend was abusive, so when a man puts limits on women, women tend to look at that as some sort of like ungodly, you know, oppression. You know what I mean? And men don't see it like that. Men see the limits put on them as just the limits that need to be put on them sometimes, as a man or as a woman. But women see that as some sort of ungodly oppression, and I just don't think it was really even that bad. I just don't.
Well, maybe in today's today's world, it's just a mere fact that most people don't know how to pick their mate. They just simply don't know how to pick their mate because they don't know themselves well enough to pick their mate.
Outside of traditional roles, people don't like. That's why in the past, why they had those traditional roles. That's why they had those limitations, because they were what worked best for families and for societies. And now that we're like, we want to create something new.
No, those traditional roles did not work best. You had women who were getting beaten by their husbands, women who had to deal with the fact that their husband would go out and impregnate some other woman and have whole other families. You had a woman's word was worthless unless it was backed up by her husband.
So I don't agree with that fully. I feel like number one, this woman generally had her family there to back her.
It's not a point of agreement.
And they knew how that woman was. So a lot of times what happens is, like, it's just like when you look at abuse stats today, right? So if a woman start hitting on a man, right, you're not really going to see some serious things. You might see some scratches if that man decides to go tell somebody that she was hitting on him. But when he decided to get fed up and hit on her, you know, she's going to have a black eye. And then she's going to go tell the whole world, this man was beating on me, and forget everything that she did. So I think like what we see is the outside. We see like the outside of it. We never saw the inner workings of that. I don't think people thought the woman's word was worthless. I think they knew how I think they knew how men and women interacted in these family situations, and they knew nobody had clean hands. And a lot of times the women definitely didn't have clean hands in those altercations that ended up happening.
Nah, man, nah. And the Bible clearly says that if a woman makes a promise, that the husband or the father or the brother has the right to come and say, hell no. And then her word was null and void. That women,
promise, by the way?
Any promise. It just says promise. It's an open, general statement of promise.
That would have to do with understanding the emotionality of women. Women will promise you, I will be with you forever.
Oh my gosh, no, dude.
And the minute your breath stinks, she gonna be like, that I never said that.
No, what are you like 30?
No, I'm older than that.
No, sir.
Women change their minds with the at the drop of a hat. As soon as the wind blows different.
So do men. That's why I have only like 2 male friends in my life, because
that's why they say a man of his word and not a woman of hers.
They say a man of his word because men have dominated society for the last 8,000, 12,000 years.
It's because as a man, if you don't keep your word, you could have got unalived. And as a woman, people expected you not to keep your word because they knew you were wishy-washy.
Bruh, it is all patriarchies. And you're trying to, and it's to protect women.
Yeah, the patriarchy is to protect women. A lot of times, it's to protect them from themselves. Because they are wishy-washy and emotional and solipsistic.
You have a very low appreciation for women, dude.
No, if you pay attention to all the women in your life, you know this is real. We love them, but we know how they are. We know how they are.
No, I pay great attention to women, and I pay great attention to men. And I see the best friends that I've ever had in my life have always been women, more so than men. And I found those women to be more truthful, honest, and to their word than I found the dudes. When my life went into different states of turmoil, it was the women who remained loyal to me as a friend, and the dudes who ran off like little Pabs. And Pab is a punk ass.
I can't speak to your particular situation, and I don't necessarily want to throw doubts or questions.
But the thing about it is that in my lifetime, I took it upon myself to study the psychology of people and the sociology of people. And oftentimes men have developed these ideas of what a person, a group of people can be and are based on the protection of their own levels of power and maintaining their power. And the whole thing about power over women is power over their birth rate, so that you can then maintain power over where your money goes, the inheritance. Because the Bible even tells you that women couldn't have inheritances unless they married another person within their clan. And the women had to fight just to get that inheritance. At first, they weren't getting any inheritance. And so women were kept in a state where they were dependent on men.
But hold on. There's an interdependence that goes on here. And we both do need each other. And that's why we both try to hold each other as much as possible to the social contract as much as possible. And that's why we balk and we get highly upset when we feel like the other is violating the social contract. And when it comes to things like inheritance and keeping it in the family, that's why men are so upset when, let's say you with a woman and then you come to find out that child is not yours. And a woman is like, oh, well, you still raise them, and a father is just the one who raises the child. But you as a man are not going to accept that. Because you like, no, I want to raise my own goddamn children. Because that's my blood. You see what I'm saying? So, like, there's a social contract that if one violates it, then the other is going to be highly upset. You know what I mean? Because we do have to depend on each other for our legacy and our ability to keep our civilization going and our, and our legacy going, for lack of a better word. So it's not wrong for us to start trying to hold each other accountable for that. Like, for instance, that's why you see in Muslim society, like and even in the Bible, like when you talking about having a whole other family, like that was something that was looked at as taboo, for instance, in your Christian society based off of European culture. But in Muslim society and biblical society, you could have a whole other family, but you had to be responsible for that whole other family. And I would argue that even in this society, in the 60s or 50s or 30s, whatever you want to say, when a man had one family and went off and formed another one, he still had to be responsible for that whole other family. So, like, men don't get into the game really for free. You know what I mean? You still are held responsible for that family. And where you have the Christian law or the Israelite law, if I create another family, I can't run off on that family. Like, if I'm accountable for that family.
I understand what you're saying, and hear me out fully. Although I do agree with polygamy, I have no problems with polygamy.
Polygyny.
Polygyny.
Polygyny is the when a man has more than one woman. Polygamy can include also when a woman has more than one man.
Yeah, I don't care about either one of them.
Okay, cool.
However a person want to do it. If two dudes want to have one wife, that's on them. Do what you
I
do.
get where you're coming from. I mean, I would balk at that, but I understand where you're coming
Yeah,
from.
if adults come to the conclusion that's how they want to live, then go ahead and live that way. I don't have a problem with that at all. The problem with the problem in your statement is that the legal world from the 70s back to 12,000 BCE put women in a restrictive state where they had no choice but to accept that type of lifestyle, right? Even though I think that polygamy is fine, a woman before the 1970s in America, a woman could not have a bank account without a man's signature on it.
From what I heard, that was another lie where they talked about the specifics of that. That wasn't fully true. It was the. I'm gonna tell you what I said. You can disagree. It's fine. I heard that a woman could have a bank account, but if she was married, they wanted the husband to sign off on it. And if she wasn't married, they would put her through the rigmarole of how she was making that money as a single woman, and she could often be denied because they could see it as she was getting her money in immoral ways. But
so a woman had restrictions on her being able to have a bank account, no matter how you slice it.
I mean, sure, the society was very judgmental.
And my mother had to have my grandfather on because she wasn't married to my father. She had to have my grandfather had to be on her account.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean,
women.
If you look at today, if you look at who has the most consumer debt, there might have been a good reason for that.
No. So my grandfather had a whole nother damn family, right? I literally got an uncle that's younger than me.
Yeah.
Now the thing about it is that the time frame that my grandparents grew up in, if she would have left, one, society would have listed her as a pariah. Two, there were spousal abuse laws when he used to, from my aunts and my mom, them stories. I mean, my grandfather stopped doing this before I was born. So it was a hard pill for me to swallow because I love my grandfather, but I had to accept it that he used to be physically abusive towards my grandmother when my mom was young, right?
And you're unprovoked?
Oh, definitely unprovoked.
You don't know that.
Nah. I know this. I know this from childhood witnesses who grew up with my grandmother.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. No, I highly doubt it.
Nah, just like you give the benefit of the doubt to Jesus, my grandmother gets the benefit of the doubt. If it was one of my other aunts, I probably wouldn't. I would probably be on your team with that one, but because she is rowdy as hell. But my grandmother, no. So
never know. People change.
Nah. So anyway, you about to get me triggered talking about my grandma now. But no, I'm just joking. The thing about it is that women didn't have many options if they were experiencing abuse. The fact that a woman, and these are American laws, but a lot of these laws were spread out around the world as well. If a woman couldn't claim that her husband essayed her, women literally had very little rights as human beings for the overwhelming majority of their history, right? And only through special circumstances of wealth did women become queens or something of that nature. But for the overwhelming majority of women, they had very little rights over their body, over their lifestyle. And if they did separate from their husband, they would be destined to poverty. Like, this is why even in the biblical story of Ruth and Naomi, without a man, had to take charity until Ruth was able to marry Boaz. But even the lands that Ruth's husband originally owned, they could not even go to Ruth, which is why when she returned back to their homeland, she was impoverished, because that was how women were viewed. That they.
I think you're missing something. And the part I think you're missing is that before there were police, before there were all these, enforcement mechanisms to ensure, that people behaved in a civilized way, you had to have strong men on your team to ensure that people behaved. And that was the enforcement mechanism. So
that has nothing to do with how women were treated.
It does. Because you can't be like, oh, well, if this woman didn't have a husband, she was just on him. Every man was just like, she was just doomed to poverty. Like, it was because people who didn't have strong people on their side would suffer, period. Point blank, period. If you weren't a strong man, you know what I'm saying, you would suffer, period. Like, that was just the times. Women just aren't as strong as men. You know what I mean? This is why, like, for instance, let's go.
That's how the patriarchy started. Might makes right, but might don't make right.
Yes, but those people they also enforce honor. You know what I'm saying? It's like, for instance, when you go back to the beginning of the gangs, the Bloods, the Crips, those were formed to protect the neighborhoods, and they got out of hand, right? But this is just the world we live in. We live in a harsh world where people are bandits, where it's hard to eke a living out for everybody. You see what I'm saying? So, like I said, those police that we rely on, we can look at them as gangsters in a way, because they're the ones that are gonna come and enforce the law by force. You know what I'm saying? If you're not following it. So in the end, might always makes right. And then you just need conscientious mighty people to keep things civil.
And that's the problem. There is no time frame in history where the overwhelming idea has been conscientious mighty men.
Well, I disagree with that.
Now, every point in history
that women can get out of hand too, and I think that where you find that women were limited in the society, it was to keep them from getting out of hand. Men had limitations as well to keep them. If a man, for instance, if a man raped a woman back then, right, and they knew it was rape, that man was unalived.
Not as only if she was the property of another man. If she was betrothed to another man, or she was already married to another man, yes, she would be.
No, because look at Dina in the Bible. Dina was not married to anybody, and that king came along, snatched her up, and raped her. And when her brothers found out, they went and found him and unalived that guy.
But it wasn't because of the SA. It was because they were Canaanites, because they weren't of their tribe.
Because of the SA.
No, because even after, and then what happened after they went and they genocided that whole town? Their father Jacob chastised them for their actions. So they
didn't have to G-side the whole town, but I don't know about that part. I just know about them G-sided the guy who did it.
No, they did the whole town. So when you read the story,
like real quick, if you read in the Bible, for instance, you talk about the SA, right? If somebody SA'd them and then they had to automatically marry them, right? But if you look in the Old Testament too, it says if they SA that woman, and she don't scream, right? Then they wouldn't consider it an SA. And that's just them trying to be logical, trying to say, well, if she screamed, that means she didn't want it. And now we're going to consider it an SA.
And think about that. They didn't know about people going into states of shock.
No, they did not.
So they viewed it as she must have wanted it if she didn't go into shock. And
I will say it's I mean,
and if you're
it's iffy, man. It gets iffy, especially when you start looking at these situations now, SA, where especially when alcohol is involved. In my opinion, I think if alcohol is involved, it all should be thrown away. Everything. But you get in these situations where a woman will be in a moment, enjoy, do it, have no problem with it, and then when there's some social consequences that come later, like maybe she feels ashamed that she did that, or it comes out that she did that and she feels some shame, she will say she was SA when she wasn't.
That happens, but that doesn't happen on the norm. Normally,
it happens on the norm. I've seen it happen.
I mean,
especially in college.
I've seen your version. I've seen your version happen, but most of the time of the accounts that I know about, it's been the opposite. It was the woman was saying no, And the dude continued.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't there to see that woman saying no. You heard her story afterwards.
So did you.
Yeah, but that's my point.
So, but
that's why that situation is tricky, and their solution for that was to say, you know what, we're just going to take this as a relationship, and just this is what it's going to be, because we can't tell either or. And as long as he ain't walking around beating her up all the time, then we're going to establish they had carnal knowledge of each other. You know, we're going to take this as a relationship rather than looking at every situation like that. We got babies all over the place, you know, without mamas and dads.
But that is horrible. That is still no matter how you slice it, that is a horrible mentality to have, that any woman who is SA'd and not betrothed has to marry her essayist.
But that's it. I understand when you say SA, I will fully agree with you. But the problem is, you really have to say that any woman that claims that she was SA. You can't just say any woman that was SA. You have to say any woman that claims that she was SA.
Well, to go exactly with the nuts and bolts of what the book says in that instance, it says that, and they are caught.
And they are caught.
And they are caught, right? Then, so I want you to think about this. A woman gets SA'd. They are not caught. The man is not caught, right? So she's not a virgin anymore, right?
So they walked in on it pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's you can go there and say that they had to walk in and catch him doing it, right? So they were caught. This woman is no longer a virgin. Her father then betroths her off to another man. In Judges, it talks about that if a man finds that his wife is not a virgin on the day of marriage, then that girl is to be stoned to death. Do you see a problem with that?
Repeat. I'm sorry. Repeat. I got to check.
If a man finds that his wife is not a virgin on the day of their marriage, she is to be stoned to death.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that, but what they're trying to say is, you know, that they're implying that she was promiscuous before she was married.
Right. They're implying that she was promiscuous, but if she was SA'd and they were never caught, it could have been that situation as well.
Again, but
since we split hairs.
You would never know. That's why that's the problem.
Right. Since we're splitting hairs. So
in this realm of like, you would never know.
So
you
why?
Like, let me ask you a question.
But why are we killing women if they're not a virgin, but not killing men if they're not a virgin?
Well, Islamically, they would also stone the man if he wasn't. So like, whenever and Islamically, a man that is caught in the act of fornication, but there are two like opinions on this based on like the Quran versus the other things that Muslims follow. But in general, I'll just say a man or a woman, both who are caught in the act of adultery or have been accused of it with 4 witnesses, both are stoned.
Now, this is a man, a woman is stoned. The question I asked was, a woman is stoned for not being a virgin. Why isn't a man stoned for not being a virgin?
Well, I would assume that it's because you can't tell if a man is a virgin or not.
Do you know that you really can't tell if a woman is a virgin? That whole idea that every woman bleeds when she gets it the first time is not true.
I know, but we know that people were working based on that. We know.
And they were working based on controlling women.
It wasn't about control.
It is all about control and controlling.
No, it's not. It's about keeping. It's really trying to maintain family integrity. It's not about controlling women. It's about maintaining family integrity. Because when the family integrity falls apart, the clan falls apart, the tribe falls apart, the society falls apart. And women are a key aspect of that. Men are too, but women are a key aspect of it. They have the children.
They're only key because they have babies. They're looked at property.
That's the world we live in.
That's because they're viewed as property.
And look at what happened when women started start getting birth control. Look at the STD rates that go out of control. Look at all the father, the baby daddies we got, the what's the word I'm looking for? The single mothers we have. Like it's out of control. Look at what's happened to society, especially Black American society. Because guess what? The integrity of the family is not being controlled. And that means you have to put limitations on men or women. That just is what it is.
That is not the integrity of the family. That is the unfairness of economic opportunities.
I disagree.
It is it is not on the relationship. It is on economic
opportunity today, and they're ruining families.
If when a family is economically prosperous, those families have a higher potential of staying together. But when a family is economically stressed, that family has a higher possibility of separating. Economics
the divorce rates and these women divorcing
and the number and the numbers, the second major reason for divorce is finances. It is not.
That's what they say.
It's adult infidelities and finances are the two major reasons for breaking up of marriages. It has nothing to do with control of with women going out here doing any and everything.
I would say in this day and age, divorce is really because the man is worth more divorce than marriage.
What?
I would say divorce is so high today because given the laws, family court and divorce system, the man is worth more to the woman divorced than married.
Nah. Economically, that doesn't even work.
Yeah, well,
it's better to have 100% of his check than only have a third of his check or half his check.
You would think, but that being independent of him and being able to get his money anyway.
But that's not even the cause today, because in most places there's just an economic worksheet that you fill out and they determine whose children you're gonna stay with, and you just fill out a worksheet.
I think if you look into it, you would see the incentive is on the woman's part. Economic incentive on the woman's part to divorce her man.
Nah, not any. It may have been in the 90s and early 2000s, but it's not anymore.
I think it's still the case.
No, I've gotten divorced in both time frames, and it is more equally fair in today's world than it was prior to 2000. In today's world, there's no emotions. The judge just pulls out a worksheet. Do you work? Do you work? Both y'all work. All right. Tell me how much you make. Who's getting the kids? How, and is it 50-50 or what's the separation with the kids? They put that in the worksheet, and it all just comes. It spits out a number, and that's just how it works. You know. Now you got some states that are different, like Texas and California are straight up 50-50 states. Like half the assets are going to be separated no matter how you slice it. They don't give a damn. But it is looked upon more as an economic contract when you go through a divorce process. But maintaining the family has more to do with the stresses of infidelity and finances. This is why on my relationship channel, I tell people all the time, look, if you want to have sex with other people, y'all just need to have that conversation before y'all get married and decide what kind of relationship y'all gonna have, instead of sneaking around and all this other bullshit.
And I ask you a quick question on this topic. Do you think women are more likely to marry men who make the same amount that they make, or who make more than what they make?
Women are more apt to marry men who make the same amount or more. Because
I gave same or more, like, are they more likely to marry somebody who makes more or the same?
Preferably somebody who makes more.
Okay.
That's
gonna affect.
It is. It is.
When they get divorced.
It does, and it has been. It's been affecting it. There are plenty of demonstrations where a woman is getting divorced and she thinks she's going to get some money from this man, but then when they do the worksheet, it's like, nah, you ain't getting much of nothing from him unless you got the kids and you get child support, but you're not getting as much as you think you're getting because it's based on how much each one of you guys make.
She stops working before they get divorced, and then she goes, let's run this divorce through. Like that.
Well, this is most women who are making more money than their man is not going to risk their careers just to get a little more child support.
But when that man is making more.
Now, if a man is making more, then he's going to pay more. whoever is making more is going to pay more. The biggest issue, the reason why you don't see this.
Woman's not going to marry a man, but woman's not going to want to marry a man who makes less than she does.
In most cases, you're right, because just like men are hard coded in certain ways to look for a woman to be a nurturer and a wife and a mother, women are hard coded to look for a protector and a provider. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that we don't match up. We don't use our discernment, our ability of reasoning to match up better with our mates.
I don't think the court should be involved here. If that was up to me, if I was Trump, that's my homie. If I was Trump, I would abolish family court altogether.
That's what's wrong with you right there.
I don't have no problem. Black maggot all the way. I would abolish family court, and I would actually abolish civil court too, because I believe what's criminal is criminal. If it ain't criminal, shouldn't be no court cases.
That's never gonna work.
Hey, that's the way I see it. I believe
we have had civil and criminal court has been in existence since the first civilizations came about.
I didn't say there's a high likelihood that I would get it through. All I'm saying is that I believe in crimes with victims, and if there are no crimes or no victims, there should be no court cases. Point blank, period.
I can't even respond to that. That's so crazy. That's ridiculous. That's so ridiculous.
It makes sense, you know it does.
No, it doesn't. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Tell me how it don't make no sense.
It doesn't make sense, because if you didn't have any types of civil courts, right, then somebody who accidentally drives into somebody else's car would have no recourse.
It's a crime. You cause damages.
Not every time it's a crime.
But that's a crime. I believe if there's no crime, there's no victim, no court case.
So the person should go to jail?
Not all crimes end up with jail time.
How do you gain restitution?
Well, you can get restitution, like, be community service, or maybe
No. How does the person who was injured in the car wreck by the other person being at fault get restitution?
It's the insurance.
So the person doesn't have to pay. Well, so when the person, that the majority of Americans are driving around with no insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have any insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So how do they determine this person now this person wrecked your car? They don't have any insurance. But since they don't have any insurance, you're saying that, oh well.
Well, I'm saying, but basically, if you cause, we get into the detail of what deserves jail time and all that kind of stuff. But like, for instance, like let's say, I don't believe in like long sentences either, but let's just assume if you can build into the law restitution as well. You know what I mean? Like that could be part of the, like, just like you have.
And that is the purpose of civil court.
No. But if it's a crime, only if it can be considered a crime. But if it wasn't considered a crime, then that restitution shouldn't be built in. But it got to be a crime. It has to be, you have been convicted criminally for this. Then we can talk about restitution if we're not talking about jail.
But everything would have to be built into a crime. Everything that is in civil court now would have to be built into a crime.
Yeah, no problem. And most
So
of it is, technically.
This is why we have the separation between civil and criminal. Because everything should not be built into a crime.
I think it should. I think if it ain't a crime and there's no victim, no court. And you mentioned interesting about insurance. That's one of the things that we pay so much taxes. I think the government should be insuring us on a lot of these things instead of us having to come out of our pockets for those insurance.
Yes, you sound like a socialist for MAGA.
Yeah, on some levels, because I do believe that the money that we give to the government, should be used in a socialist way. If we're giving money to the government, all that money should be just like they claim that it is, right? Like the military, trash, all that kind of stuff. Those are socialists technically. Like, but any money that we give to the government should be used for the people. Point blank, period.
Yeah, that's socialism, which I find interesting coming from you.
We have
But
some of that already.
let me ask you,
Like,
Ricardo said, would adultery be a crime?
no, like not in the society we live in. Adultery would not be a crime. No.
So a man commits adultery or a woman commits adultery. It's not a crime. He leaves his family. He or she leaves the family, but since it's not a crime, they are left there to their own devices.
Child neglect. Child neglect is a crime.
How is child neglect a crime?
Or child endangerment is a crime. So if you leave your family and you don't provide any means for them to live, eat, have a shelter, anything like that's child neglect. Right? Or it's endangerment of children.
That's why we have civil court.
But we don't need civil court.
All you're doing is transferring everything that is in civil court into criminal court.
Because it should be criminal from the beginning. We don't need two separate court systems.
Those are semantics. Yes, you do. And let me tell you why you need the difference between civil, even though this is way off topic, but it's cool. The reason why you need a separation between criminal and civil court is because in criminal court, you have a higher standard of burden of proof than you do for civil court. And because a person like OJ had something to do with them damn murders, but you can't prove it, but there's enough civil information to demonstrate that he had something to do with them murders.
It should be the standard of the criminal court. If it's a crime, it's a crime.
You would have corporations, corporations would love you because corporations will be able to get away with all kinds of stuff.
I don't agree. I think the corporations that commit crimes should be taken to court for the crimes they commit and prosecuted for the crimes they commit. So that CEO that allowed them crimes to happen and that have victims, he needs to go to jail if he did that. Fraud, robbery, all that kind of stuff. They're crimes.
So the whole housing bubble would have been a crime.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Because stupid people took on loans that they didn't fully understand, and when shit hit the fan, they couldn't pay for it. So those CEOs are criminal because the consumer was stupid.
I know I just said that the whole housing bubble should have been a crime, but anything in that was considered fraud should be criminally prosecuted.
It wasn't fraud. It was the fact that they said, hey, you can get this loan on stated income and it's based on the LIBOR and you're going to pay this for 7 years. But then when it's going to convert to a conventional and then you're going to have whatever the interest rate is at that time frame for this loan. And them dumbass people was buying it.
All right. Well, then know that if it wasn't a crime, cool. But at the same time, it should have been no too big to fail.
Now, I agree with you there. They're too big to fail to a certain degree.
That did that, the government shouldn't have backed them up and gave them money for that. They should have been left to fail.
Well, the reason why some companies are too big to fail is because of the impact that they would have on the national economy.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But I feel like when they went to...
I don't like it.
Guarantee the banks, like you don't guarantee the bank, you guarantee the people who have their money in the banks. You let the bank fail.
So what, the people put their money into a bank that's not failing?
So people put their money into those banks that did all those crazy loans, right?
Yeah.
Like the people who had their money in the banks, you guarantee their money. But that bank and that CEO, gone. Need to go. Let it fail.
There's my brain is working through a process where that would actually work. Yeah, but that ain't gonna happen though.
I mean, I agree with you because we got crony capitalism.
That's not gonna happen. It's better for the people, but they ain't gonna let it happen.
If you gave the people their money, then the people would decide where they want to put their money again, and let them crony behind banks fail. Then the people restart the economy up again.
That might be the one thing that we might agree on today.
We agreed on something.
I'm sure there's some other things we did agree on as well. But
yeah,
you're
I miss down south off a little bit. Hopefully one day I can get back down there. So
I hope that you get a good woman that just love up on you so good that you just change your mindset on women though.
Me too, but I'm still not gonna change my mindset because I know what it is.
You have sons or daughters?
I have a son.
Oh man, please! I hope you have some daughters.
But it is what it is. Any sons or daughters I consider it a blessing. So I'm not gonna be like, I hope I don't have no daughter. I'm not that type of person.
I mean, in one instance, I hate to put a daughter on you because having daughters drive a man crazy because you want to protect them like nobody's business.
They hot in the pants.
Well, only if you allow them to be surrounded by people and influences that allow that bullshit. But daughters turn men into like Wolverine. But at the same time, I hope you have daughters because there is no way. Well, let me not say no way. In most cases, a man who has a daughter can never look at his daughter and subject her to the mentality of the patriarchy.
Well, let me tell you this. All of the people that created the patriarchy and all of the people that had, created all those religious texts that you would call patriarchal, they had daughters. And I'm pretty sure they had more daughters than you ever had.
Yeah, but they was in a society, they fell into they didn't have the options within their societies. They were the
order out of chaos, and they looked at what the reality was, and they created the best order they could. I don't think they did a bad job.
They were. It's kind of like when I talk to when my pappy was born in 1927, right? As a black man growing up in Alabama in 1927, as much as he wanted to smack the shit out the little white kid that he had to say, call him Mr. or whatever, and that little white kid would call him boss, he knew he would have to call that little white kid boss. He knew that the society at that time would not allow for him to be able to get away with it because of the level of marginalization. Now, flip the script, and we get to the 90s or the 80s or 90s and into the 2000s, we know that now the majority of the community, the majority of society wouldn't stand for that type of treatment of a black man, right? So when you're living in a situation where your daughters and women by the majority of society is looked upon as property, don't have rights, don't have agency, this is how things go. Even though that man may have felt like he wanted to change it, he knew that he was one out of thousands and he wasn't in a position to change it. And even those who were in those positions, they risk a lot if they tried to change it.
What you're hitting on, oh man, it's very macro because it has to do with not with just classes of people. You know what I mean? We're talking about gender, which is going to apply to all people, and then now you're also talking about classes of people. Like servant classes versus upper class.
Well, women no matter what were in a servant class back in the day.
But I don't want to confuse the conversation per se, but it's kind of like the butler that works at the rich people's houses. That little boy say something funky, they can't smack that little boy either. You know what I'm saying? So because they work for that, for that person. So and that's where that came from. That came out of slavery, where we were that that servant class, and they were trying to keep us in that servant class. Whereas I think patriarchy was created more for the human reality, period.
No, patriarchy started because the men were stronger and the women were weaker.
Patriarchy was created because of the reality of genders. Mm-hmm.
When you go back as far back as we can go right now is about 13,000 BCE, and relative to that time, the men were stronger. The men went out and did the hunting. They did the heavy building, the heavy lifting. They fought the wars. They then imposed their dominance, and that dominance as civilization developed turned into the patriarchies, because it was based on just brute strength, not intellect or anything of that sort.
It was based on a lot of intellect.
No,
I understand. I understand your love love women too, but we gotta understand that women are human actors just like men are human actors, and we have good sides and we have bad sides, and we had to create societies that took both of those into consideration to try to create a productive situation. And that's the way I see it. I don't think it was born out of injustice. Everything can be tweaked. You know what I mean? I think it can go wrong. I think it can go left either way. But I don't think that the patriarchy in and of itself was what's the word I'm looking for? The big word, a maleficent or malicious situation.
I don't think it was born out of injustice. I think it got corrupted into injustice. The more we develop civilization, it got corrupted into injustice.
I mean, like I said,
I think that 12,000 years ago, the people in Taran Tepe probably viewed women as just as vital and important as the men who went out and hunted. But as the societies developed and became agrarian societies, which is when civilization really took a big jump, that's when the patriarchy became corrupt and started separating between the genders and submitting one as a lower caste to the other.
I'm going to say this. Sadly enough, and this is why men are always going to get the blame for it, is because men have to regulate the men and the women. So when it comes to that enforcement mechanism for the evils that humans are capable of, it's going to be the men regulating the men and the women. And I think that's why it's going to always be seen as if somehow the men have more power than they should. And that's why patriarchy is demonized. But I don't think patriarchy is a bad thing, but it's not that I don't think some people have excesses or some cultures have excesses. I do believe that excess happens, but I do not think patriarchy is an unjust or evil thing.
Yeah, we just gonna have to disagree on that one. We ain't gonna come to any mind meld on that. Cool. To use my Star Trek terms.
I'm gonna give you a follow, and God willing, we'll talk again. And God bless you. You don't believe in them, but God bless you, bro.
And may the energies of the universe bless you.
Appreciate you.
All right. Y'all have, man, okay, 3 hours. I am so hungry. I have passed my lunchtime. We are going to go ahead and end this. I do want to recap a bit. One thing I love about my Facebook and YouTube people is that y'all will have conversations without me, whether I like it or not. I try to incorporate as many of your questions as possible. I will get better at utilizing both TikTok and StreamYard at the same time. But I'm always looking for, I was looking for the person who was supposed to come on Facebook and YouTube today. They never showed up for them to be able to come on. I guess they just didn't have time or something didn't work. But I enjoyed the show today. It went off to a whole different subject matter of patriarchy, just like it normally does, but at least we did talk about the advantages of being atheist/agnostic and not having to submit yourselves to these types of ideas, not having to be able to think freely and to be able to shake off the burden of all the shame and guilt that you have to carry around with these religion. But I have to say, I didn't get his name so I can pronounce it right, but Urum, definitely, I have to say that I didn't think about this until just now. So it's not because he's not on that I didn't think about it. He's not live right now. I didn't think about it. But part of the beauty of becoming agnostic atheists is that, I'm gonna just call it AA, is the fact that you don't have to support nor defend the mentality of a religion, and you can just look at history and you can look at the current society and recognize it for what it is. Because just like he admitted that he had the bias towards the Jesus character because of his religiosity, and I'm sure I'm going to talk to him again and I'm going to ask him the question, that the patriarchy is also a biased, holdover from being part of the religion. And so instead of looking at people for who they are and not saying that, well, we got to do this so we can keep the women in line, so we can keep society intact, so that, well, keep the family intact so that society doesn't fall apart. Society is not going to fall apart because we loosen up or get rid of the patriarchy. The chart that I put up earlier, many of the countries that are doing better than America have better family structures, have better quality of life. They don't have as much of the patriarchy as some of the other countries. Countries like Sweden, the Holland, the Netherlands, those countries have done a lot better in the world, a lot better for their societies, a lot better for their cultures than the ones that are based on religious ideas. So it's a whole thing that when you walk away from these religions, you don't have to uphold those ideas of the books, and you can go and think for yourself, and you can rationalize and realize what really was going on. So yeah, it's like saying that slavery was necessary in order for us to progress, or the Holocaust was necessary and has a net positive, and they just don't. We can get there. We can get to a equally fair society without having to go through the destructive nature of religions. I meant to say ask him about how men, why is it that all wars are started by men, and most crimes are committed by men? But I'll ask him that on another episode, because I'm about to be done. I'm really hungry. So, and I'm not one of those people going to eat while they're doing their podcast. And right, Justin, we didn't learn our physical laws by praying. So I enjoyed today's broadcast, and I look forward to us having another broadcast on tomorrow. We go live every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, starting at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time frame. Look, Facebook and YouTube, TikTok is doing better than y'all as far as people who are willing to come up. I know TikTok is engineered for that, but you know, Facebook, YouTube, y'all don't want to come live, so I'm calling y'all out. You know, the few TikTokers are doing better than y'all as far as being willing to come on to the live. You know, y'all put your big boy, your big girl draws on and come on. So we'll talk again tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. Y'all have a great day. Continue to share all the videos. I will produce some more videos in the next few hours. So y'all have a great day, and always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations, and go into the description of the YouTube or TikTok version of the videos and get your reservations to be here in San Antonio, October 31st through November 2nd. There's free food. Later.